In a game, in the Woldbury Forest, a warrior is badly wounded, and not only that, he's completely surrounded, with his fallen friends beside him. A guy tells his lady that even after everything, a certain person still hasn't shown up, so he wants to know what they're going to do. With a sinister look, she orders them to eliminate everyone. Thus, the executioner, without a second thought, charges at the warriors to wipe them out. The warrior looks back, expecting the worst, but someone moves swiftly in the shadows and with incredible agility and power, intercepts the attacking executioner. The warriors get excited when they see it's Jaehyun. One of the Imperial soldiers realizes it's Hirkin and quickly shouts for everyone to capture him. But Hirkin hears the order and, filled with power, moves rapidly and cuts down the one who gave the command. Not only him, but also the others who were approaching. He looks back with a mocking smile, covered in blood, and asks if they really think that all ganging up on him will change anything, since he knows none of them are good enough. This is Hirkan. His real name is Jaehyun, from the Haughty Mask Guild, and his nickname is Hero Slayer. His friends start apologizing and saying it was all their fault, because they didn't realize those people were the ones hunting them. Hirkan puts away his sword and makes it clear they don't need to apologize. He says that and extends his hand to help them. Then he reassures them that he's fine and tells them to get up. His friends are moved, having been saved once again, but Hirkan keeps emphasizing that, honestly, none of what's happening is their fault. And, looking at the person sitting and watching, he concludes that they're the real pathetic losers, since the real problem is people who can't fight fairly. With a sinister look, he asks the woman if he's wrong. She just smiles without saying a word, stands from her chair, and comments that it's all very exciting, but wants to know what's the point of their friendship. As she walks up to Hirkan with two people at her side, she makes it clear that trash coming together is still just a pile of trash. Her real name is Seol Yeon-chae from the Thunder Hunters Guild, and her nickname is Thunder Queen. Hirkan starts laughing and says she's being pretty sadistic, considering they're the ones getting beaten by the so-called trash. She gets serious and warns him to choose his words more carefully, or she might make him regret it and leave crying. Hirkan grabs his device and asks if she really plans to try making him regret it. He then activates his inventory, equips his mask, his weapon, and finally his full armor, completely transforming. He points his sword and makes it clear that things like regret are for weaklings like her. She goes crazy with rage and calls him a cocky little bastard, shouting for her minions to eliminate him. While Hirkan laughs and wonders if they never learn, he doesn't realize he's been severely impaled by a sword. When he notices, he's confused, but quickly realizes it was by his own friends, the ones he just saved. It doesn't take long for the system to warn that his HP is dropping fast and that his movements are being restricted because of it. As he collapses to the ground, he wonders what the hell just happened. His friend, upset by what he did, apologizes and explains that everyone there has to put food on the table in real life and that they have nothing against him. Hirkan wonders why his friends betrayed him like that. Meanwhile, Sil starts laughing hard and, unable to hold back, keeps mocking him, saying he's such a fool for believing in their act of friendship, as if that mattered when money is involved. She then starts walking toward him. As she reaches his fallen body, she calls out to him and makes it clear she's kicking him out of the game. She also emphasizes that if she kills him every time he logs in, she bets he'll eventually quit playing. While Hirkan is lying on the ground, furious, he hears her say that she heard he's a full-time warlord player and that without the game, he's just a useless piece of trash in real life. With a completely mocking expression, she wants to know if he really looks like he's gone back to being just trash. He becomes restless, claws the dirt with his nails, and charges at her, screaming for her to shut the hell up. But in an instant, blood sprays through the air, leaving him in disbelief. She's also surprised, seeing his friends stopping him with several swords stabbed into his body. She thanks them all. With the little strength he has left, Hirkan starts trembling and still insists on knowing why his friends did this, since the guild they had meant everything. His friend, guilt-ridden, simply asks Hirkan to die already. Then he says they were paid a few billion just to eliminate him. Hirkan remains disappointed in his friends, even after everything he did for them. He makes it clear that they once said they'd all be a family, but looking closely at their greedy faces, he realizes it was all just an illusion. Then, several system messages appear, saying that he has died and will receive a 48-hour login restriction penalty. He suddenly wakes up in the real world, terrified, screaming, and thinking he lost everything. The game in question is Warlord, a VR game that took over the world, highly profitable and powered by AI. Jae-hyun thinks that game was what made him more than just trash. He remembers when he was playing and met the friend who betrayed him. At the time, he seemed really nice and even invited him to form a guild together. But every time he thinks about it, he gets even more furious, because what happened was unforgivable. He grabs his shirt, puts on some slippers, and runs through the city, thinking he must find and kill everyone involved. He grabs his phone and calls Dong-soo, wondering if he knew everything he went through and if they really think they can just move on alone. But as he runs like crazy, he doesn't notice the red light for him. At that moment, a truck comes speeding and gets dangerously close to hitting him. While he's thinking that if he had known things would end like this, he never would have wasted time caring about anyone. And now, unfortunately, he's about to be hit. Unable to dodge, he gets hit and thrown hard to the ground. While falling, he hears his phone say the number he called is unavailable and starts questioning how. Of all things, he ended up getting hit by a truck. He keeps thinking over and over that he can't die there. He also remembers the face of his friend who betrayed him and Sil, who totally screwed him over in the game. With the last bit of consciousness, he thinks he must get his revenge at all costs. Then something strange happens, and a system message says he's connecting. It says it's identifying the user. Finally, he receives a welcome message from the system. He opens his eyes, confused, and even more confused when he sees a huge monster in front of him, with several dead bodies around, and a large system screen asking him to complete the tutorial, where he must survive against the Minotaur, the Labyrinth Master. He tries to understand what's going on and what the hell kind of tutorial this is. Then he hears someone calling him a noob. Looking ahead, he sees two guys shouting at him, telling him to stop spacing out and wake up, and asking if he didn't see the alert because they need to defeat the Minotaur now. The creature doesn't waste time and lets out a huge roar. One of the guys says it's impossible to solo the front pocket since it looks like they'll need 13 of them to take the monster down. Hirkin asks them to wait a second and says he wants to know if the Minotaur is that tutorial boss type because he remembers it was removed from the game 5 years ago for being too hard. The guy is stunned and wants to know what the hell he's talking about, since the game Warlord was released only 10 months ago. That makes Hirkin even more confused about the situation. He starts thinking about the release date, but soon says he understands. Hirkin crouches down and picks up the sword. Then he starts walking toward the Minotaur, while the others want to know where he thinks he's going. Ignoring them, Hirkin gets ready, and as he charges straight at the boss, the guys wonder if he's crazy. The Minotaur notices his opponent's approach and prepares his powerful attack. However, Hirkin manages to dodge it at the last second. Increasing his speed, he lands a fierce blow, completely slicing up the tutorial boss. As the Minotaur's pieces fall to the ground, the guys who were there are left speechless, unable to believe what they just witnessed. But they soon exchange sly smiles and call out to Hirkin. One of them reaches out and says Hirkin is really good, then asks if he wants to join their guild. But Hirkan sees this request as a replay of when his old friend first invited him, so he gets super frustrated again. Then he says he just made a decision. While the guys laugh and ask what he decided, they are brutally wiped out by Hirkan's frustrated rage. Completely drenched in their blood, he says that if he ever trusts anyone again in his new life, he can be considered a damn dog. After returning to the real world, he's startled and wonders where he is, realizing he's in a huge V-Gear store full of people. Then he remembers that 5 years ago, he couldn't afford a VR device and had to use a demo unit. That scares him even more because it means he really went back in time. But he tosses the VR helmet aside and thinks that in that case, there's no time to waste. He runs out full speed, thinking he has 5 years of future knowledge and all the skills he developed. And if he puts them to good use, he's sure he can get his revenge. Without hesitation, he pulls out his credit card and asks the clerk for a V-Gear device. She looks a bit startled by his request, but quickly says, "All right," and that she'll process the payment. Jaehyun thinks that's great and starts wondering where he should begin. Then he hears someone calling him. It's the clerk, who awkwardly tells him his card doesn't have enough funds to buy the device. He's completely stunned. Then he looks down and remembers it makes sense. No way he'd be playing there if he had money. He starts to panic, wondering what he'll do and if he has to start making money first. But he thinks that would be bad, since he can't waste time on that. Then he's startled by a familiar voice asking why he's hesitating. Looking at the big screen, he sees Syl saying the strong never fear a challenge, because hesitation is a luxury on the battlefield. Then she urges everyone to become a warlord. That's Syl, the Thunder Queen, and the game's top-ranked model. Jaehyun watches the game ad on the massive screen, shocked that he just saw the person who took everything from him. He immediately remembers her saying he had gone back to being the same trash as always. Furious, he turns around and thinks he's in no position to be picky. The afternoon passes, and at his house, a V-Gear device is being installed. The technician tells Jaehyun the setup is done and the V-Gear is ready to use. Jaehyun replies okay and thanks him. Looking at something in his hand, he thinks that was the only way he could afford the device he had to borrow the money. He remembers when he went there, and the guy wanted to know how much he needed. Jaehyun said 10 million won, and the guy had no problem lending it. While Jaehyun had his hand on the table, the guy reached into his shirt and suddenly stabbed a knife between Jaehyun's fingers. And with a sinister look, he made it very clear that if the protagonist couldn't pay, things would get really difficult. Jaehyun was a bit hesitant about that, but said it was fine and that he'd managed to pay. Remembering this, he thinks it doesn't matter. As he starts getting ready to log in, he thinks that even if he has to crawl through hell, as long as he can take down the people who betrayed him, he won't have a problem with it. Then he shouts, "Link start!" The system appears, notifying that user identification is in progress. Once identification is confirmed, the system welcomes Hirkin back to Warlord. He immediately thinks it's been a while since he was there and knows it's time for her to show up. But he wonders what was her name again. Then an entity appears and congratulates him on completing the tutorial. She introduces herself as Ariadne and says she's there to guide him through class selection. Ariadne begins using her power and explains that he must choose a basic class and that there are 3 options currently available. The skills he develops in his basic class will determine his advanced class later. A warrior is a fighter who uses close-range weapons in battle, and if he enjoys action-packed combat, this class is perfect. Hirkin becomes a little intrigued, thinking about the warrior class since he used it last time, and knows it allows for fast leveling, but he also knows that playing solo with it gets pretty tough later. So he replies that he doesn't want that class. Ariadne describes the priest class, which is a support role that heals and empowers allies with magic. But the protagonist also refuses and makes it clear he's not going to waste time helping others. With that, Ariadne says only one option remains and hopes the minister's play will be exciting. She then releases her power, which starts enveloping Hirkin, surprising him with the energy surrounding him. It doesn't take long for the system to announce he's chosen a basic class and will be teleported to his class tower. When he arrives, an old man sitting on a book welcomes him and calls him a young seeker of knowledge. He introduces himself as Golko and says he'll be the guide on the path of magic. He then asks what type of magic the protagonist wishes to learn. Without hesitation, Hirkin answers that he wants to learn dark magic. The room falls silent for a moment. The old man asks if the protagonist really said ancestral magic and apologizes, saying his ears aren't what they used to be. Hirkin replies no, and that he said he wants to learn dark magic. Shocked, the old man asks where he even heard of that, since dark magic is powerful but devours the user's soul. The protagonist confidently replies that he knows he's fully aware of it and is willing to bet everything. Golko starts trembling and releases a black spring. Then his expression changes completely, and he says he hopes they can dive straight into this. He laughs, saying it's been a while since he saw a young person choose that path. After summoning a book of dark magic in front of the protagonist, he says that if he's ready, he should place his hand on the skill book, but warns again that this path is too treacherous for weak hearts. Without hesitation, Hirkin quickly places his hand on the dark book and with a confident look, says to get on with it, and emphasizes that his heart is far from weak. He starts laughing as the dark energy begins surrounding him. As the energy takes hold of him, Golko comments that someone interesting has finally shown up. Hirkin remembers a legendary video from his past life, the Necromancer player soloing a boss raid. He concludes that this is exactly the kind of power he needs right now. With that, the system announces that he has become a Reclaimer, his current title, Airhead, and that he's gained the skill, Bone Shard. Hirkin gets excited about the skill and immediately decides to test it, throwing a skull onto the ground. The system notifies that a skeleton warrior, infused with the protagonist's magic, is starting to take form. Hirkin just watches his magic take effect, and as soon as the skeleton he summons stands before him, he thinks that this time he's going all in on necromancy. He turns and says it's time to level up and that he thinks the training dungeon should be just ahead. But then he looks at the skeleton soldiers he summoned and sees its head has fallen off. The two of them just stare at each other in silence. After that, a portal opens and someone steps out of it. It's the protagonist, with the system announcing that he has entered the beginner training dungeon. He's quite frustrated because seeing his summoned skeleton lose its head so easily makes him think back to how the summons he saw in his past life weren't that fragile. So he doesn't get it and opens the status window of his summon. He sees his skill, Bone Shard, Proficiency F, Summoned Unit, Level 1 Warrior. Usage, creates a Bone Shard. Target, infuse it with mana to summon the skeleton. Hirkin wonders if maybe he overdid it a bit. That's why he thinks he needs to level up quickly. Then he hears a sound and quickly turns to see what it is. Several charcoal wolves are approaching. Hirkin gets excited. It's finally time to test his skill. Some say charcoal wolves aren't that strong, but they're very fast, making them perfect to test combat performance. So he casts his Bone Shard skill and commands it to go after the wolves. As soon as the skill hits the ground, the skeleton soldier is summoned. The system then notifies that the skeleton warrior has detected an enemy and assumed a combat stance. The wolves, upon seeing the summoned creature, seem a bit intimidated, but the protagonist simply tells his summon to eliminate them quickly. The skeleton soldier charges at the creatures. Hirkin is excited, thinking this looks better than he expected and that at this rate, he'll reach max level fast. But with just one of the wolves' attacks, his skeleton soldier is completely shredded. He's left extremely disappointed by what he just witnessed. The skeleton's skull is thrown to his feet, making him furious and confused at the same time. He quickly opens the system screen and asks it to wait because this can't be right, and he wants to check the skills again. Clicking for more information, he realizes he probably forgot to set the mode, so he switches to Defense Mode 1, but the result is the same, and this time, the wolves are just gnawing on his summon's bones. He switches to Mode 3, Special Action, but that mode makes the warrior do the dance of enthusiasm. Hirkin starts crying, thinking he's completely screwed. He sits down and thinks this is a nightmare he's going through. When he tries to delete his character, the system notifies that character selection is unavailable because newly created accounts can't delete a character for 3 months. Hirkin reflects that unfortunately, he can't delete the account, can't change classes, and to make things worse, his loan payments start next month. He starts wondering if he should find another way to fix this. He also questions why nothing is going his way, just when he thought he was finally getting somewhere. Looking at his summon, he knows that idiot doesn't help, so he asks his summon to just stand still, please. He wonders how the hell that necromancer from his past life endured so many battles. Then he remembers something. He looks at the status window and sees that it's possible to improve in combat. He recalls that when he defeated the charcoal wolves, his summon was watching him the whole time, as if it were learning the movements. Then he smiles, throws his club to the summon, and makes it clear that it's lucky to be his minion, because, even if it doesn't seem like it, they used to call him a genius he trained a whole life and turned them into rankers. And there's only one thing his summon needs to remember about combat. He says this as he charges forward to land a blow, emphasizing that if the summon doesn't dodge, it dies. After landing the punch, he throws his summon far away and immediately tells it to get up again. Then, the same thing. He keeps doing it over and over, landing multiple hits on his summon, always slamming it hard against the wall, until he yells, telling it not to just stand there like an idiot after getting hit. It's supposed to dodge first, then counterattack when there's an opening. The skeleton soldier wipes its face and prepares for combat again, but this time, it's against the charcoal wolves once more. This time, however, it manages to dodge the wolves' charge and then lands a counterattack right on the jaw, and finally, a powerful spinning strike. With that, It defeats all the charcoal wolves. The skeleton soldier then turns to its master with a grateful look, but the protagonist wants to know what his summon is looking at. He already said there should be no distractions in battle. Still, he smiles and comments that the last strike wasn't bad at all. Then, the system informs that his bone shard proficiency has increased multiple times. Hirkin smiles and tells his summon did a great job as they leveled up. Sometime later, in the starter village of Castle Fegus, the protagonist is walking through the city, hearing people say the legal guild is recruiting new members, and others talking about a forest raid. He thinks his little bone learns fast, but knows that with a few more days of training, it'll be able to solo dungeons. That's why he sees this as the crucial point first. He needs to reach level 10. Suddenly, someone calls out to him. It's a chubby guy with a dumb face, wanting to know if the protagonist doesn't know he's supposed to apologize after bumping into someone. Hirkin starts wondering who the hell these third-rate bullies are. While the guy keeps talking trash, Hirkin doesn't care at all and thinks he doesn't have time for this, and that it might be best to just kill them and move on. The chubby guy gets ready to punch him while shouting that the protagonist is ignoring him. But then, out of nowhere, a guy appears and blocks the punch. He immediately says the chubby one can't go around punching people. The guy gets nervous and wants to know who the hell just blocked his attack. Hirkin starts sweating cold as he remembers who that person is. Looking at the guy's muscles and strange clothes, he's sure it's Shev the Slayer, the legendary warrior from his past life. The protagonist, afraid of what the chubby guy might do, shouts for him to wait without thinking, but the guy doesn't care and spits on the ground near the legendary warrior. Then he cracks his knuckles and tells Shev to stay out of it if he doesn't know anything, because it was the protagonist who bumped into him and didn't apologize. So he wants to know if Shev's never heard the saying, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Shev starts laughing, but then releases his terrifying monstrous aura, which makes the chubby guy crap his pants. The protagonist is really impressed by the power he feels. Shev smiles, but with a terrifying look, and says that in that case, since the guy hit the palm of his hand, should he retaliate? The chubby guy's friend screams, warning him that the man in front of them is Shev the Slayer. Then he says Shev is the leader of the Red Bulls, one of the top 30 guilds, a battle-crazed lunatic known as Shev the Killer Slayer. The chubby guy turns to his friend and asks why someone like that would be there, but Shev grabs his shoulder and wants to know the answer. The chubby guy turns with a terrified face, but then he and his friend run away apologizing. Shev starts laughing and says he's glad everything was resolved peacefully. Then he pats the protagonist on the shoulder and asks if he's okay, saying he shouldn't worry about people like that. But Hirkin quickly turns and brushes Shev's hand off his shoulder, making it clear that next time, he doesn't need his help. The Slayer is left confused, not understanding what the hell just happened. Smiling, he thinks that was pretty cold. As he quickly walks away, Hirkin thinks that for a moment, he was completely overwhelmed by Shev's power, but he clenches his fists and, furious, swears that the next time they meet, he won't be the same person he is now. Sometime later, in a dungeon, the protagonist is still thinking about what happened earlier and how the difference in strength is painfully obvious, but he knows Syl and Shev are at the same level, which means he needs to become just as strong if he wants revenge. While he's thinking about that, a massive black tiger charges toward him. However, without doing anything, his skeleton soldier easily defeats the creature coming his way, and with no mercy, the skeleton finishes off the black tiger. The system announces that the skeleton warrior has killed a black tiger and leveled up. While his summon looks pleased, Hirkin takes a deep breath and wonders if it really took him 3 days to reach level 10, thinking that it took longer than expected. That leaves his summon a bit upset, but after a while, the system finally congratulates the protagonist for reaching level 10. It says, monsters will no longer appear in the training dungeon, his beginner mark has been removed, and his rewards will be processed. Hirkan gets excited he finally made it. The watch is an essential device with several functions: stats, quests, map, inventory, and messages. The protagonist thinks it's been a while since he used it. He quickly opens his status window and sees that he's level 10. His class is Necromancer, with 3 points in strength, 3 in stamina, 5 in intelligence, and 5 in magic. He thinks it's a shame that his stats, but then the system prompts him to allocate his available stat points. He reviews his stats to decide what would best support his goals. He knows this is just the first stat distribution, so he needs to be careful. As a necromancer, the obvious choice would be to increase intelligence or magic, but he decides this time will be different and puts all his points into strength. With that, the protagonist's strength stat increases by 50 points, bringing his total strength to 53. His summon looks extremely disappointed. Seeing it upset, Hirkin asks what the problem is. Then he knocks on its skull and makes it clear he hasn't given up on necromancy, he's doing this to train it. He explains that increasing intelligence or magic right now won't make much difference, but investing in strength will allow him to teach it every move he mastered at his peak. He's literally betting his life on his summon's learning. The skeleton soldier gets emotional at its master's words, which only makes Hirkin more irritated, telling it to just focus on training while he takes care of the rest. He then says there's another way to make up for the other stats. The next day, he goes to the Monster Hunting Association at the Castle Figus branch. The mission distributor grabs an item and shouts to everyone there that fresh missions just arrived. While the crowd starts fighting to grab missions first, the protagonist calmly walks through them, thinking that missions this time of year are usually bad, but the guys are still hyped. So he figures they're all noobs. When he gets to the counter with the old man who gives out missions, he says he wants one and asks to see the list. The old man agrees but warns him that all that's left are the ones no one wants, either too hard or with lousy rewards. As Hirkin scans the available missions, he thinks most of them are really boring, but he notices one that catches his attention. After picking it up, he thinks he's found his ace. It's the Baima Mountain Cave, a basic mission with low-level monsters. The old man finds it strange and asks if he's sure he wants that one, since the reward is just 10 gold coins. He replies yes, and the system notifies that the quest has been updated. Then he thinks that at first, it seems like just any quest, but if completed before level 15, it'll grant him an ultra-rare title, Rising Star. The protagonist reflects on how people often question the value of a simple title, but he knows that titles increase a player's stats. For example, a scatterbrained mage who gets mocked by a wolf might just be a low-level alchemist with poor attributes. But once he obtains the Rising Star title, it increases attributes by percentage. In other words, this is his first step toward becoming a broken character. So he turns around, and after leaving the Quest Association, he thinks it's time to gear up. Sometime later, on Mount Bima, Hirkan isn't looking too pleased. He realizes he equipped himself with something ridiculous. He immediately starts complaining, wondering what the hell he just did, since after spending all his money on equipment for his summon, he only had enough left to afford cheap stuff, and now he looks like a fool. But he knows he just needs to finish the quest quickly and buy real clothes. So he runs off to complete the quest right away. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, a bloodied hand rises. It's a man lying wounded among the plants, calling for help until he gets dragged back in. Sometime later, a warrior arrives at Mount Bima and declares that the grand adventure of the Great Multi is about to begin. He feels proud for being level 11 and thinks he might even become a top ranker in record time. Then he hears someone screaming for help, asking for someone to save their lost friend. The warrior rushes over and asks what happened. The priest says a monster started attacking them out of nowhere, but he barely escaped, and to make it worse, they ran out of healing potions. The warrior starts looking through his device and says he thinks he has some potions and tells them to hang in there. The priest starts crying and thanks the warrior, but it was a total setup. Another guy was ready to strike the warrior while he was off guard. After taking the hit, the bleeding warrior collapses and wonders what just happened. The priest thanks him again and, along with his friends, makes it clear to the fallen warrior that they'll make good use of his items. The warrior is crushed when he realizes he was tricked by such pathetic people. The priest drives his sword into the warrior, finishing him off, and says it was his own fault for falling into such a lame trap. The system announces that player Multi has been eliminated and removed from the game. It also says the player's watch has dropped and is now up for grabs by the bandits. The bearded warrior laughs and says nothing beats messing with noobs. With several watches on his arm, the priest turns around with a sinister look and tells his friends to go find the next sucker. They are members of the Ralph family, part of the infamous player killer gang. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, the protagonist's summon is ready to battle some fierce creatures that charge at it. Hirkin snaps his fingers and switches his summon to attack mode, making it rush at the creatures without hesitation. And with little effort, it completely obliterates them. The system reports that the skeleton warrior killed an ancient wolf and gained 375 experience. After another kill, 366 more, and finally, another 379. As Hirkin watches his summon handle the creatures, he thinks that now that he bought it a sword, it can defeat an entire pack of ancient wolves on its own. He also knows he made the right choice by prioritizing gear for the skeleton. Pleased, watching his creation grow stronger, he thinks that real gamers focus on performance, not appearance. The skeleton soldier looks back, sees his proud master, and immediately wonders why he's looking at him like that. However, Hirkin turns and replies that it doesn't matter if his summon is done dealing with the ancient wolves, then they should just leave already, because he needs to level up and get rid of the horrible outfit he's wearing. Little Bone runs after his master, but something suddenly comes flying, and an arrow hits the summoned skull dead on. This startles the protagonist, who wants to know where the hell the arrow came from. Someone approaches, apologizing. It's the same cheating players from earlier. The priest says he's really sorry, and explains that he saw the protagonist's creature from afar and thought it was a monster. They keep insisting they're sorry. Hirkin was about to say it was fine, but then he notices the blood-stained watches on the priest's arm, as well as the warrior's sword. He quickly concludes they're scum, so he starts acting, smiling and saying it's fine, but asks if they happen to have a mana potion. The priest apologizes again and says unfortunately they don't, but offers to help him level up, since his mana will naturally recover with each level up. The protagonist keeps pretending he doesn't suspect anything and says that sounds good. The priest insists it was their fault, so they'd be happy to help. Looking at the monsters ahead, he calls his group to battle. He explains that they'll weaken the monsters and the protagonist can deliver the finishing blow. As they move in, the priest quietly asks if everyone knows the plan. They all respond yes. The warrior whispers that he'll take aggro first. Then, the mage says he'll cast an attack buff second. And finally, they'll accidentally let the monster loose toward the clueless protagonist. That way, the poor idiot will panic when he sees the beast charging at him, so they all just wait for it to happen. However, they're quickly left speechless, unable to believe what they're seeing. The protagonist's summon easily defeats the creature. Hirkin then says he's fine and asks them to just keep going. They start wondering what kind of summon he's using, and maybe his level is higher than they thought. In that case, they decide to start sending multiple waves at once against him. Then, while he's distracted, the warrior sneaks up behind him. As he's about to strike, he thinks all he needs to do is defeat the summoner. But when he attacks, Hirkin easily dodges it, leaving the warrior confused as hell. His target just dodged an attack from a blind spot. With no time to react, he gets hit by a brutal blow from the protagonist. The priest panics and shouts, wanting to know what the hell is going on. Hirkin snaps his fingers and calls for his summon, Little Bone, who immediately joins him and charges at the thugs alongside his master. They scream in fear, begging them to wait. But with no chance to defend themselves, both are attacked by the coordinated strike of master and summon. After their bodies crash to the ground, Hirkin makes it clear he knows their kind all too well. As he walks toward them, he says they're the type who earn people's trust just to stab them in the back and take their loot. But he admits that if he still thought like before, he might have fallen for it. The blood-covered priest starts screaming in desperation, begging the protagonist to wait a second and just take all his items and go. But sadly, Hirkin makes it clear it's too late. He no longer trusts anyone. He says that, then mercilessly finishes off his opponent. At that moment, the system announces that player Ralph has been eliminated and that the 8 watches he carried have been dropped. After seeing how many watches Ralph had, the protagonist becomes furious, thinking the guy really was a scumbag. But something about it also makes him happy. He knows he'll make good use of the drops. First, he's going to get himself some proper clothes, but as he turns around, he sees his summon kicking the already defeated warrior, so he calls out to him and asks if he wants any of the drops lying around. Then the protagonist extends his hand and starts healing the wound caused by the arrow his summon took. It doesn't take long for Little Bone to be fully healed. He then raises his sword and strikes a heroic pose. Hirkan looks at his excited summon and says, "It really looks like he's happy." The protagonist also comments that appearance doesn't matter in the game, but while striking a ridiculous pose, he emphasizes that what truly matters is being beautiful on the inside. As his summon stares in shock at its master's absurd pose, Hirkan smiles and says the priest's dropped watches were truly a jackpot. There's less than a 1% chance that when someone sells another player's watch, the inventory will drop random items like rare gear with stat bonuses. For example, the goblin's black pants he equipped, which grant 5 extra points in mana and 5 in intelligence. Also the Sword of Ancient Essence, which gives 10 more points in mana, plus the skill books, from which he obtained the Book of Demonic Curse. And lastly, the most important, lots of gold. Hirkan picks up a mask from the dropped inventory and thinks that thanks to the fools he defeated, this was faster than expected. He then concludes that he'll soon start recording his gameplay and knows he'll need the right style for that. But after thinking about it, he remembers something that makes him uneasy. He starts recalling his past life, how he once asked the friend who betrayed him to imagine their whole guild wearing traditional hey-ho masks. At the time, he was so excited, saying the next day they'd rename the guild to Hey-Ho Mask. Remembering this leaves him a bit down, and he even considers completely changing his style. However, he begins doing something to the mask, altering its form entirely, and thinks he refuses to let anyone take what's his ever again. Furious, he tells himself he'll prove he was right, and this will be the beginning. So as soon as he equips his sinister mask, he runs off and calls for his summon to follow. Sometime later, in a different dungeon, the protagonist and Little Bones step through a portal, and the system announces that he has entered the Bima Mountain Cave dungeon. Hirkan examines some markings on the rocks and thinks he clearly remembers that in this dungeon, there are blue werewolves. He also knows they're tough monsters, but with his new gear, he believes he'll be fine and might even clear the dungeon in 10 minutes. So he calls his summon to go all in. A few hours later, Hirkan is in disbelief and yells, asking why there are no monsters around. He starts thinking this is driving him crazy because he knows if someone had already cleared the dungeon, the system would have sent a message. Then he sees his summon doing something near the rocks, and when he turns, he notices something that grabs his attention. So he heads over to where his summon is and sees something strange on the rocks. Suddenly, a massive dark energy begins to swell. The system announces that the protagonist has discovered an instance dungeon and asks if he wants to enter. He falls to the ground, startled, and says that must be why no monsters were spawning, because instance dungeons are random dungeons that appear inside another dungeon, and when they do, the normal dungeon shuts down until the instance one is completed. He also knows these dungeons are much harder, but give double the rewards. He starts wondering if it might be a trap, because he knows once someone enters an instance dungeon, they can't leave until it's completed or they die. So he gets up and tells his summon that, logically, he should just walk away, because if he dies, he won't be able to play for 2 days. It would make much more sense to just farm easy missions, but he knows that's not what matters right now. With that, the system confirms he's entered. After stepping through the portal, he says that as long as he doesn't die, he should be fine. But soon, a bright light covers his face, and as he tries to look around, he wonders if the place he's in is an ancient arena, also feeling an intense atmosphere. Then he gets startled by a powerful tremor, which was caused by a massive, sinister werewolf standing before him. It's a corrupted werewolf of unknown level. The creature doesn't hesitate and immediately launches an attack at the protagonist, who is still trying to understand what's happening, and, unable to defend himself, is struck and thrown hard against the wall. Little Bones sees his master in trouble and immediately gets furious, assuming a battle stance. But Hirkan laughs and says this is perfect. He keeps laughing and says his luck is insane since a corrupted monster appeared. He's convinced this must be material for a main quest. He then calls for his summon and makes it clear that if they can't defeat the werewolf, they can say goodbye to dinner. With that, he charges at the creature. Little Bone gets ready too. Then, he lays down his sword for his master to step on and leap toward the corrupted werewolf. The creature lets out a loud howl, but Hirkan uses his skill curse release, and his sword is instantly infused with the energy of the demonic curse. The werewolf has no idea what this mere human is doing, but in the blink of an eye, it's struck and has one of its arms sliced off. The werewolf starts screaming in pain as the system notifies that the protagonist's skill is active and the target's stats have been reduced by 10%. As the werewolf howls in agony, Hirkin looks at his sword and reflects on the demonic curse, thinking that for a first try, it wasn't bad at all. However, the werewolf starts releasing a bloody aura and, now extremely enraged, charges straight at the protagonist. At that moment, a system message appears, warning that the corrupted werewolf is enraged and all of its status effects have been nullified. Hirkin simply prepares for the worst, thinking he was already expecting at least this much from a dungeon boss. Then he smiles and says he was saving this for later, but right now seems like the perfect time to test it. He activates his inventory, and a dark energy begins to surge, completely engulfing him, until an explosion occurs, unleashing all the energy, and Hirkin appears fully equipped in sinister battle armor, laughing and asking where he left off. A slot is one of Warlord's unique game features. When activated, the slot channels pure energy from the world of Warlord, enhancing attributes and shaping the player's body. As for the form, it's completely unpredictable, as it varies for each player, which is why most players usually call it Supreme Mode. Hirkin calls out the corrupted werewolf to bring it on and show what it's got. The beast becomes furious and lets out a powerful roar. Then it charges at the protagonist, but as it tries to strike, Hirkin dodges without much trouble. He keeps avoiding multiple lunges from the werewolf. Then he jumps back to gain some time, but the creature doesn't care and unleashes another powerful attack. While evading the werewolf's strike, the protagonist thinks that his opponent is definitely a boss, given its speed and power. He starts to wonder how many of the beast's attacks he could withstand. The werewolf comes charging again, showing several possible openings. Noticing one of them, Hirkin, with his sword radiating energy, lands a powerful slash on the werewolf, making it scream in pain. He then smiles and says that this is why he finds the game so fun, but he's startled by a tremor, as the werewolf is still not defeated and is attacking again. Hirkin takes a deep breath and realizes his opponent is still enraged and that he can't afford to relax in battle. While airborne and the werewolf about to grab him with its claws, the protagonist looks to the side, wondering if his summon is just hiding something. Then, Little Bone jumps onto the werewolf and manages to cut off its other arm. Hirkin immediately shouts to his summon, saying it's time for the attack they practiced. The werewolf is left confused and helpless as it's hit by their combo attack. The attack was so fast that they managed to land several simultaneous strikes, slicing the enemy completely, and the system announces that they have defeated the corrupted werewolf. Hirkin then deactivates his slot and comments that it wasn't bad at all. Next, the mission card the protagonist selected starts spinning and glowing brightly. It reveals that the Mount Bima Cave mission, Defeat the Monsters, has been completed, and the protagonist received 10 gold coins as a reward. The system also announces that the Skeleton Warrior defeated a high-level monster, and the skill, Bone Shard, has been upgraded to rank E. Additionally, the protagonist also obtained the werewolf's skull and hide. While his summon celebrates, Hirkin notes that it seems like instant dungeons really do have the best drops. The system continues by announcing that the protagonist obtained the Corrupted Tracker's Necklace, a unique chronicle item. It boosts all class-related attributes, plus 18 to all stats. It's bound to the user, non-transferable, with only one requirement: the user must have the Corrupted Tracker title. Hirkin is quite surprised by this drop. He knows he can't sell it, but it's still a higher class item than any standard one. He gets even more surprised as he also earns 3 new titles. Rising Star, which grants plus 3% to intelligence and mana. Hirkin knew he was going to get that one. The next title is Hero Challenger, granting plus 3 to stamina. Hirkin comments that he even got a group title, since he soloed an instant dungeon. And finally, the Corrupted Tracker title. He's quite surprised and wonders if this is the introduction title for the first chapter of the main quest, the Corrupted Count. Hirkin knows that the main quest is the foundation of the Warlord game world, being a crucial storyline, and because the rewards are insanely good, every player wants in no matter what. It's the core content of Warlord for players. While trembling from all the rewards he received, he thinks that even in his past life, he barely made it to Chapter 4. He gets excited and thinks that what he got wasn't luck, but a jackpot. So he yells to log out immediately. Back in real life, he sees a breaking news live stream with a player announcing that his guild, Hydra, has officially entered the final phase of the corrupted count scenario and that they aim to complete it within 3 months. Jaehyun pauses the live stream and feels really down because what he thought was a jackpot in-game turns out to be nothing in the end. Then he gets furious and starts banging his head on the desk, since that player and his guild are already in the final phase. He considers that maybe he has no choice but to stay out and wait for the next chapter. But then he gets an idea. He goes back to his computer, thinking that maybe this is actually the perfect opportunity, since he knows the entire world is currently focused on the corrupted count and the first main quest of Warlord is about to be completed. So he wonders if anything would change if he posted his video about the corrupted count, thinking it might go viral. Jaehyun thinks it was a great idea to have recorded everything, so he knows he needs to edit and upload it to WTube as fast as possible. However, he also knows that editing is the key, and he can't just leave that to anyone, meaning there's only one person for the job, the legendary editor from his past life, the filmmaker, Romeni. She sees the protagonist's request and wonders who this person named Hairkin could be. While checking the request, she questions what a level 15 could even accomplish. Maybe the starting cave, guessing it's just some rich newbie making a flashy video for social media, until something catches her eye and she ends up genuinely shocked, remembering a certain person. Then she gets really excited upon realizing who it is. This is Romeni, a freelance video editor, and her in-game nickname is Hell's Mouth. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a woman is watching some news on her tablet. One of her employees rushes in, asking if she called. She says a new video about the corrupted count has just been uploaded. She hands the tablet to her employee and says it's quite interesting, since a level 15 defeated a corrupted werewolf solo. The four-eyed guy laughs and says her team also saw him, but made it clear that corrupted werewolves are low level, so they didn't think it was worth tracking. She smiles and says she liked it. Then she asks her employee to bring the person from the video to her. This is Sholyon Che, heiress of the Thunder Corporation, the biggest business conglomerate, and her name in Warlord is none other than Thunder Queen Syl. The next day, the protagonist is quite surprised looking at something on his phone. Seeing the video he posted the day before, he notices it already has many views. To be exact, over 6,000 views. He feels awkward, knowing it took him months to reach that many views in his past life. Looking at the message Romeni sent, asking if he saw the view count, he realizes something else has changed. She contacted him first. He knows that normally she never reaches out first, as she's supposedly a very mysterious person. Then she asks when he'll send the next video. Jaehyun lies back in his pod, takes a deep breath, and says he's wondering that too, since he has no idea what to do for the next video, and there's no way he's going to find another monster like that werewolf with the ear again. So he thinks it's better to start making videos only once he reaches level 50. That said, he turns on the VR device, begins logging into the game, and thinks he needs to strike while the iron's hot. Meanwhile, Shev the Slayer is watching the protagonist's video. He comments that no matter how many times he watches it, the protagonist's moves always seem impressive. However, he becomes intrigued by something while watching the video and wonders if he doesn't already know him from somewhere, as he seems very familiar. Then a beautiful woman arrives. This is Yel, affiliated with the Red Bulls. Shev tells her he's talking about Herkin, the one with the Ha-Ho mask, and that he's one of the trending topics right now. She wants to know if her friend is watching the video again, saying it would be strange if he weren't familiar when Shev watches it all the time. The blonde guy takes a deep breath and, all excited, shouts that the game makes you feel like you're moving in real life. So when people play for the first time, they tend to be shy with their movements. But that's not the case for the protagonist. Then he asks if she saw how the protagonist trained his summon, since it's on another level compared to other necromancers. Yel starts getting annoyed with her friend's chatter and yells at him to shut up. Then she starts pushing him and tells him that if he's going to keep talking nonsense, he should go back inside because they're going live in 5 minutes. Shev smiles, winks, and says he really likes her. Crossing her arms and taking a deep breath, she says that if he really does, then he'd better do well in the upcoming live stream. She then says that over 200,000 people bought tickets just to see him. the leader of the Red Bulls, and the man ranked 9th in Warlord, the Slayer Shev. With that, as the live stream begins, a dungeon portal appears, and both he and the members of his guild get ready to enter. Shev smiles and, pointing his blade, tells everyone to prepare for battle. Meanwhile, at the affiliated Raiders Association of Castle Figus, Hirkin is very disappointed and starts slamming the table because there are no missions available. He wonders how there could be absolutely no good mission, so he considers taking a break from making videos for now. The old mission man approaches and says he knew the protagonist was the adventurer who cleared the Mount Bima cave dungeon. Hirkin remembers the old man. He introduces himself as Hotan and wants to know if the protagonist has a moment. After going to a more private place, the old man says he's heard everything and knows the protagonist even encountered a mutant in the Mount Bima cave. Hirkan is puzzled, thinking he doesn't remember any such quest, so he says he just saw a werewolf with strange eyes. Hotan turns and says that's what he thought, as he believes there's a strong chance the monster the protagonist faced had been exposed to the power of the corrupted. Hirkin finds this odd and wonders if the old man has lost his mind, but Hotan emphasizes that he doesn't know exactly who it is, but it's certain that the protagonist's power is causing monsters to go mad, and several are becoming victims. That's precisely why the Raiders Association has placed a bounty. But before he can finish speaking, his arm is suddenly grabbed. Hirkan, eyes gleaming, says he'd like to help capture this wicked bastard. He says this thinking it might be a hidden quest, and that he needs it as soon as possible. The old man tries to explain that he thinks it's too early for the protagonist to take this on, but Hirkan doesn't care, and makes it clear everything will be fine. Hotan gets a little embarrassed and says that, in that case, he'll give the protagonist a chance, depending on how well he does. Then, he says there's someone named Ahimbri in Castle Bangsu, east of Castle Figus, which surprises Hirkin when he hears the name. The old man goes on to say that this person will be able to guide him, and that he'll also write a letter of recommendation. Thus, the quest Ahimbri's Teachings is created, with the objective of finding Ahimbri and showing Hotan's letter of recommendation, with a skill book as the reward. Hirkan leaves the Raiders Association and shouts in joy. Then he wonders if this is really happening, and if, by any chance, he actually got a quest to become Ahimbri's student, knowing that this person is one of the 7 disciples of the Grand Mage Bokan, since all mages want to meet him because he provides rarer skill books. In other words, he's a very important NPC in the game, so he runs off happily, thinking he probably got this opportunity because the Rising Star title combined with the main quest of the Corrupted Count, and that if things go well, he figures he won't need to worry about video material anymore, until he stops and realizes he almost forgot something he needed to do first. Then he heads into a forest, uses his bone fragment skill, and summons it. After Little Bone appears, he realizes he hasn't checked the rewards from the last battle, so he decides to start by using the werewolf skull he didn't sell. The system asks if the protagonist wants to use the werewolf skull to enhance the skeleton warrior. He says yes. The system then informs that the skeleton warrior gained werewolf traits and received 2 extra points in toughness. Hirkin knows it's now time for the Corrupted Tracker's necklace, so he wastes no time and equips it. The system announces that the effects of the Corrupted Tracker's necklace have been applied to him, giving him 18 extra points in all stats and boosting all class-related attributes. Hirkin knows everything is going well, since his preparations are complete. Next, he grabs 2 more bone fragments and throws them on the ground, summoning 2 more skeleton warriors, which leaves his primary summon confused. Hirkin tells Little Bone that from now on, there will be 3 of them, and they'll fight as a unit, so they'd better get along with each other. As the protagonist sets out with his 2 new summons, wondering what kind of monster might be in the area, Little Bone goes crazy, thinking he was supposed to be the master's only pupil. Doesn't take long before they encounter a level 25 forest bear. It starts attacking repeatedly, forcing the protagonist to dodge them all, until the wild bear finds an opening and charges. Hirkin panics, thinking he won't be able to dodge in time, but then he smiles, snaps his fingers, and says he grabbed the bear's aggro. With that, one of his summons leaps at the enraged bear, but unfortunately, the summon takes a heavy hit and is thrown back violently, several bones shattered. Hirkin gets angry and questions if the summon really thought such a predictable attack would work, since it needs to strike from the bear's blind spot. so he tells the summon to try again. It leaps at the beast once more, but again gets hit and slammed into the ground. Hirkin loses it and starts yelling, cursing his summon. Then he points out he already said to attack from the blind spot, and wants to know why the other summon did the exact same thing. However, the third summon walks forward and strikes a ridiculous pose, which actually makes its master smile, thinking maybe this one will do better. The final summon jumps at the bear, sword ready to strike, but the bear, without much effort, just swats it with its massive paw and knocks its head off. This leaves the protagonist even more furious and frustrated with his summons. So after some time, and after defeating the bear himself, he wonders if his summons even have brains because frankly, he doubts it. Then he tells them to put their heads back on. While they do that, he tells them to listen carefully and explains that when monsters are attacked, they obviously turn toward the direction of the attack. Then he draws a diagram on the ground and says that's why his summons need to go for the monster's blind spots. He then asks what would happen if they charged from where the monster is looking. The summons just make faces like they didn't understand anything, which makes him even angrier, and he tells them to just forget it. Even so, he thinks it's great that the skill's rank has increased, and that he can now summon 3 skeletons at once, thanks to the effects of the corrupted tracker's necklace. But he knows the problem is that his summons can't work together. They just repeat what was told to one of them before, but since they haven't learned to fight as a team, they don't know how to do it. So he finds himself in a dilemma, knowing that his summons cost triple the mana, but are even worse than before. Then he gets up and says whatever, since he already reached level 20 like he wanted, and it also seems like he won't be able to make combat videos for a while. So he turns around and tells his summons to get up too, because they're going to train all the way to Castle Bangsu. He thought he'd leave the fighting to his summons while he sat back and relaxed like a necromancer should. But it seems he won't be able to avoid the front lines. So he concludes that he's totally screwed. After a while, he returns to the Raiders Association branch at Castle Bangsu. Inside, it's full of players. Then, a guy walks out of a room, and everyone immediately gets excited to see that a certain player has come out. They desperately want to know what quest that player accepted, and that's when the protagonist enters, thinking everyone there is like a bunch of hyenas. He covers his face and concludes that clearly, you can find people like this anywhere, knowing they don't even try their best on their own and just want to leech off others. Then he hears someone call him. A bald guy wants to know if the protagonist has a good quest, suggesting they could do it together. But Hirkin couldn't care less and tells the guy to fuck off. As he walks up the stairs, he reflects that he can't let anyone find out he's doing a Himbri's quest. At the top of the stairs, he hands over Hotan's letter of recommendation. The player inspects it, confirms everything, and politely asks Hirkan to head to the second floor. Meanwhile, people keep acting like parasites and desperately try to get in, claiming they're in a party with Hirkin. As he walks, he wonders what kind of reward a Himbri might give him, thinking it must be good, since it's a hidden quest, and that he'll try to build a long-term relationship with him. As soon as he walks through the door, he politely asks to come in, but is shocked to see tons of books and a huge mess. A person among the clutter wants to know who the protagonist is, since he doesn't remember scheduling anything. This is the NPC Ahimbri. Hirkin hands over the letter of recommendation, introduces himself, and says he's there on Hotan, the old man's recommendation. The NPC looks at the letter and comments that the protagonist seems to be a novice dark mage, and therefore assumes he must be pretty skilled for his level. Hirkin laughs and says it was just luck, but he thinks it doesn't matter as long as he gets the reward. Ahimbri says he understands and proceeds to give the protagonist his rewards. Hirkin gets excited after receiving the Bone Armor skill book and the Helm of Madness book. Then he thanks Ahimbri for giving him 2 super rare books. Ahimbri says that's it for business and asks the protagonist to leave. The system then announces that the Ahimbri's teachings quest has been completed. He tells Hirkin to be careful on the way back. Hirkin finds it odd and asks the NPC to wait, wondering why the quest ended so quickly, and if he doesn't have another one to give, he knows he didn't come all this way just to get a couple of skills. So he starts yelling for Ahimbri, saying he'll do anything. The NPC then grabs the protagonist's hand and asks if he really will do anything. Hirkan replies yes, With a very suspicious expression, Ahimbri thanks him. With that, Hirkan receives the quest, the nest's egg, which requires him to retrieve the egg from the nest. And to make things worse, there's no reward. This leaves Hirkan in shock, thinking the NPC tricked him. Meanwhile, a knight walks through the city, causing people nearby to grow visibly nervous. Then they begin to wonder if the knight's gear isn't some kind of very expensive type. He continues walking and heads to the Affiliated Raiders Association. Then he wonders if that's where the player Ha-Ho Mask might be. Meanwhile, the protagonist, after leaving Ahimbri's room, feels very disappointed, thinking it's really possible to get scammed by an NPC. So he walks off, thinking he expected to receive a quest related to the main storyline. But now he wants to know what the hell this egg quest is, especially since it has no reward. Still very frustrated, he keeps questioning if he really needs to do it. Then, out of nowhere, a strange guy appears right in front of him, asking about the quest. Soon, several other players surround the protagonist, all trying to find out what mission he got. He panics, thinking he forgot those guys were there, and wonders what to do now. Maybe he should just kill them all. Then, out of nowhere, the knight appears, releasing his intense power and blasting the players away. He asks the protagonist if he has a moment for a talk, saying he'd like to speak somewhere quiet. Hirkan finds it strange and wonders who the hell this guy is who just showed up. So he tells the knight to fuck off, but the knight gets really close to the protagonist's face and whispers, calling him Ha-Ho Mask and asking him to cooperate. That really scares Hirkan after hearing himself called by that name. So they go to an alley in the city. The knight says he's sorry for causing trouble. Then he taps his watch and says he felt like they couldn't talk properly out there. After unequipping his helmet, Hirkan is confused, thinking that based on the player's gear, he must be at least a ranker, but he doesn't recognize him. So he wonders who the player could be and how he knows the name Ha-Ho Mask. The knight asks if the protagonist really is Ha-Ho Mask. Hirkan starts getting nervous and thinks that in situations like this, the best thing to do is pretend he knows nothing. So he asks who this Ha-Ho Mask is that the knight keeps talking about, saying he just followed him there for a chat, but really wants to know who the hell Ha-Ho Mask is. The knight, a bit frustrated, wants to know if the protagonist didn't just receive a quest from an NPC named Ahimbri. Hirkan steps up to the player and demands to know who he is and why he should share any information, especially since he dragged him there. Still pretending he knows nothing, he flips the player off and asks if he's looking for a fight, but he thinks to himself that he has absolutely no clue who this guy is. All he knows is that he needs to keep pretending. The player stays silent for a moment, but suddenly reaches out his hand and says he clearly made a mistake and apologizes. Hirkan breathes a sigh of relief, shakes the player's hand, and says it's fine. Then he turns around to leave, making it clear he'll let it go just this once. The player just watches the protagonist walk away. However, another player had been hiding there using a skill and tells his friend that he doesn't think the protagonist is the one they're looking for. The knight points out one thing for sure. The guy isn't skilled, because if he had been playing Warlord for a while, he wouldn't have carelessly exposed his wrist with the watch like that. The other player then asks if they really need to keep monitoring the NPC Ahimbri, since the Corrupted Count quest is almost finished. And even if someone found out about it now, he wonders what they could really do. The knight says that the nest's egg quest the protagonist received is the main quest, which is why he thinks they shouldn't take unnecessary risks. So the mage says he'll return to his position. The knight agrees and says goodbye. However, someone had been watching that conversation, Hirkan, who quickly realizes there were actually two players there. He thinks they're definitely part of an organization since they're working together, but he also believes that if they were from a normal guild, they would have made an offer after revealing who they were. With that, he concludes that those guys definitely aren't ordinary players, since they were testing him like that. But he remains curious, wondering who the hell those players were. The next day, Hirkan is still puzzled about what happened, thinking there must be something more to the nest's egg quest he received. He figures they probably saw his video and already knew the Ha-Ho Mask would receive Ahimbri's quest, especially since they let him go so easily. That's why he thinks they don't care who Ha-Ho Mask actually is. So he's stuck in a dilemma, unsure what's going on with the quest he got, but knowing that if he continues it as is, he'll likely run into them again, and if he wants to avoid that, He won't even be able to post videos for a while. He wonders why those damned lunatics keep ruining his life, especially since just dealing with Seolyeon alone is already too much. Meanwhile, Seolyeon has just logged out of the game, and her secretary, Park Suji, appears, commenting that she did a great job. She then hands her lady a water bottle and asks how things went with the guild entrance exam. Seolyeon takes the bottle and says they were all trash. She also wants to know how they can all be so useless, and if there are any updates about the Ha-Ho mask she mentioned. Suji hesitates a bit, but says he seems to have joined another guild since he hasn't responded yet, which makes Seolyeon furious, demanding to know if that's true. Terrified, Suji says she doesn't think so and will investigate again. Seolyeon tells her not to come back until she's sure. While changing clothes, she asks what the chairman said. Suji replies that he hasn't said anything yet. Seolyeon smiles and explains that if he's staying quiet, it means Warlord is doing very well. Then, after getting dressed, she emphasizes that he tried to arrange a marriage by force when she told him about playing the game. While Suji is stunned by her boss's figure, Seolyeon tells her to gather a new batch of candidates and report to her the next morning. Suji is startled and asks if she really wants to hear about that the very next day, as it's quite sudden, but Seolyeon doesn't care and leaves the room, ignoring her secretary. Suji thinks her boss has a really nasty personality. Later, in a dungeon, Hirkan comments that it's been a while since he was there and that he barely remembers the lizard swamp. He figures that since Ahimbri is currently at Castle Bangsu, the quest must be somewhere around this region, especially because it involves finding an egg, so it's likely from some kind of bird, reptile, or insect. Filtering through places he can access at his current level, the lizard swamp was the only option. He then calls one of his summons and says the monsters here are high level, so he'll probably need to use the skill enhancement he received. Referring to the Helm of Madness, he knows he has to draw a mark and cast the proper spell. So he activates the helm, and his summon begins to change, its gaze now filled with a bloody energy. It quickly starts releasing a powerful aura that leaves the protagonist stunned. He gets really excited seeing his summon transforming into something incredible. He says they need to test it first, so he tells the summon to attack him, but he forgets the note in the skill that says there's a chance the summon might lose sanity. One of them takes a deep breath, eyes full of bloodlust, and charges at its master, who is now terrified. But Hirkan lands a solid punch to the summon's skull, launching it high into the air. As the skull crashes back to the ground, he demands to know how the summon dares to scream. Then he decides to review the skill more closely to check for a bug, but finds nothing. He figures maybe he got hit by his own skill somehow, but doesn't notice something emerging from the swamp behind him. A level 30 lizard man appears, ready to attack. Hirkan turns and says that, apparently, the test subjects arrived at just the right time. With that, he activates his skill again, and the system notifies that when the Helm of Madness is active, it increases the summon's attributes, and currently, the boost rate is 1.2x. Hirkan also activates Bone Armor, equipping his summon with armor, but for now, the only available piece is the chest plate. With that, all his summons are ready for battle, which makes the lizardmen a bit nervous. So Hirkan orders his summons to wipe out the monsters. They unleash a series of attacks, forcing the lizardmen into full defense. One of them takes advantage of a distracted enemy, appears behind it, and strikes with a powerful, merciless slash. It doesn't take long for the system to announce that the skeleton warriors killed 3 lizardmen and earned 864 experience points, and that the protagonist leveled up twice. Hirkan watches his summons and bursts into laughter, full of excitement. Then he tells his summons that for the next week, they'll be hunting monsters while searching for the egg, and if that's not the right region for the quest, they'll move elsewhere. While calling his summons to head out, someone watches him from afar. It's a bold woman. She plays coy, thinking about how she'll introduce herself. She keeps thinking how beautiful she is, then admits to herself that's not what she meant to think, but knows it's true, and there's nothing she can do, since everyone likes her no matter what. That's why life has always been easy for her. When she pretends she's in trouble, her slaves always come to help. But as soon as she takes a step, she slips in the mud and falls face first into a puddle. Furious, she thinks about how much she hates this place. She then remembers that one of her slaves brought her there to help her level up, but in the end, he died quickly, and now she's stuck there. Watching the protagonist from a distance, She knows the monsters there are too strong and the terrain is difficult. Then, as she stares more closely at the protagonist, she gets an idea. Maybe she just found herself a new slave. He hears a strange sound, and when he looks back, he sees Ilya stumbling before collapsing on the ground, asking for help. She puts on a pitiful face and says she hurt her legs because of the monsters, but inside, she's thinking the fool in front of her will fall for her act and won't resist helping a damsel in distress. But the protagonist doesn't care at all and simply turns away, continuing on his path. That leaves her completely stunned, wondering why the hell he acted like that. As she shouts for help, Hirkin just thinks another lunatic has shown up. Ilya bites her lip, absolutely furious, wondering how he dares ignore her. Hirkin continues his journey, fighting several monsters along the way. And while he gets bored watching his summons handle everything by themselves, he notices that the same woman is still following him. He realizes he's been ignoring her to avoid wasting time, but she just keeps following. So he starts remembering the faces of the players who tried to trick him a few days earlier, getting angry, thinking that if they're in the game, they should at least play properly. He concludes it's better to deal with this now, so he finally turns around and asks the woman what she wants. She approaches and says she dropped her sword in one of the swamps while hunting and asks if he could help find it. Hirkin makes it clear that when he finds the sword, she'd better disappear from his sight. She gets excited and starts thanking him non-stop, saying she won't forget his help, but internally, she thinks she just fooled another idiot. After walking around the area, they eventually find the sword she mentioned. Ilya thanks the protagonist again. He says it's fine and reminds her not to forget the promise she made to disappear once she got the sword. He takes a deep breath and orders his summons to go retrieve the sword. They quickly head over. While laughing, she thanks him once more, but he knows that necromancers are nothing without their summons. So she takes advantage of the fact that the protagonist is distracted and attacks him. Just as she's about to succeed, Hirkin quickly turns around and tells her she's really slow. Then, while she's still surprised and trying to figure out what just happened, he grabs her clothes and throws her high into the air, making her fall straight into the swamp. She emerges from the water and starts cursing him. Furious, she demands to know if he really thinks he'll get away with something like that, because her bodyguards will find him and destroy him. Hirkin starts laughing and tells her to look behind her. She turns around, wondering what's back there, and sees several lizard men. While Ilya tries to defend herself as best she can, Hirkin makes it clear that she still has a long way to go before she can trick him. He also points out that he could see her intentions from the very beginning. He then thinks to himself that he's been fooled too many times and can't afford to let it happen again. So he turns and says she's already wasted enough of his time, then calls his summons to leave. However, he gets frustrated when he sees them mimicking the same flirty behavior they saw from the woman. Hirkin gets angry and orders them to stop learning weird things, or he'll eliminate them completely. Then a system message pops up, informing that the player Ilya has been eliminated. The protagonist gets excited and says he wasn't expecting to earn points for that, since he didn't eliminate her himself. Then he remembers her yelling that her bodyguards would come after him, and figures they probably don't even exist. He'd even bet someone like her doesn't have anything like that. However, a group is watching the protagonist through a recording device, and they are furious. Sometime later, still in the swamp dungeon, someone is injured and has a sword pointed at them. Hirkin, while leaving his sword stuck in the player, tells the protagonist to screw off and calls him an enemy of Lady Ilya. Hirkan says he's going to ask a question, wanting to know why the player is going so far for her, since it's not like he gained anything from it, and that's why he really wants to know if he thinks she'll date him if he avenges her. The player suddenly starts smiling, which confuses the protagonist. Then the player laughs maniacally and yells that it's because he loves her. So Hirkin eliminates him mercilessly and thinks the whole thing is a joke. Then he starts thinking about the girl from earlier who tried to deceive him, which makes him remember her. He never thought what she said about having bodyguards would turn out to be true, but knows that because of it, he's been running into crazy bums like them every day. He gets excited, thinking he's pretty eager due to not finding any missions, especially now that there's a bunch of shameless people trying to get him. He then wonders if he should find that woman and kill her again, but concludes it's better not to, as it might cause even more problems. With that, the system informs him that he obtained another unowned watch, as well as 5,000 gold coins, goblin leather boots, and the rare quality promise necklace. Hirkin wonders if the promise necklace he just picked up isn't one of those super rare items that could be sold for 800,000 won. He gets excited and shouts that love is great, thanking the idiots while thinking he'll finally have a fancy dinner. Suddenly, a guy appears shouting that the protagonist is right in front of him. Hirkin turns around excitedly, saying that the guy who killed Ilya is here. However, he finds himself face to face with several warriors, so he starts running away from them, as he didn't expect there to be so many. While running, he wonders how many there are, and if it's really possible for so many people to be obsessed with that woman. Then he decides to stop running and summons his minions. One of the players comments that those are the summoned skeletons they had heard about, and says he'll let his friend handle it like they agreed. He takes a deep breath and uses his love power skill, easily cutting through all the summons, while the protagonist screams that such a skill doesn't even exist. Then, he sees a system notification that his skeleton was destroyed, so he thinks they seem to be a higher level than him, and since there are so many, he doesn't think he can fight them head-on. So he boosts his speed even more, leaving them behind, and swears that once he levels up, he'll find and eliminate them. After running for a while, Hirkin stops to catch his breath. He soon thinks that it's hard to shake players off because his level is lower, and for now, he just needs to keep moving. Then he's surprised when he feels something strange in the air. He turns around and wonders where he is, knowing that the place is very different from the rest. He realizes he doesn't remember a place like this in the lizard swamp, and that he's been in the area for days but has never seen this kind of black swamp. After thinking a bit more, he concludes it must be what he suspects. Meanwhile, the players are searching for the protagonist, wondering where he went. Then, the chubby one yells that he might be ahead, since he sees a skeleton, but what they're actually seeing are the protagonist's summons dancing like they're in a club on top of something strange. They're stunned by the sight. The chubby one gets furious, curses the protagonist, and says that it wasn't enough to hurt Lady Ilya, now he dares to insult them like this. Without thinking twice, he charges straight at the summons. But at that moment, a huge creature emerges from the swamp and grabs the chubby guy, pulling him into its massive mouth. His friends are paralyzed with fear because of the enormous creature. This is the level 40 lizard dragon, the boss of the lizard swamp, which easily devours the chubby guy. Hirkin just hides, watching the players deal with the boss. He then thinks he never imagined the nest would be the lizard dragon's nest, since he knows it's a boss with huge defense, HP, and attack, requiring a group of 20 level 40 players just to barely defeat it. He also reflects that, from what he heard, the lizard dragon raid was completed some time ago, and normally, this boss shouldn't even be here. However, he considers that if someone with a related quest enters the area like his quest to take the egg from the nest, the monster will respawn. In other words, if the lizard dragon is here, this must be the location of a Himbri's quest. That makes him even more curious, wondering if a Himbri really sent him there to defeat that thing and take the egg back, even knowing he's only a level 20 player. He gets furious, thinking that NPC is a real scumbag, but he also knows that luckily, he managed to gather some good comrades, so he figures it should be fine. One of Ilya's love slaves yells that the lizard dragon is too much and they better retreat, but Hirkin shows up and says they can't do that. He then uses his bone fragment skill and summons his skeleton warriors. The players, seeing the protagonist's summons, comment that they're surrounded. One of them, shouting that it's fine and they just need to push through, ends up getting struck by the lizard dragon without realizing it and is launched into the air. With that, the protagonist takes advantage of their distraction and runs off. As he sprints at full speed, Hirkin thanks them and says he'll never forget the sacrifice they made. He then thinks that now that the boss is occupied, it can only mean one thing. So he heads straight to the lizard's nest to steal the egg, knowing it should be empty. After jumping into the nest, he gets excited thinking all he has to do is grab the egg and get out. But he ends up shocked, as he doesn't see the egg anywhere. So he starts searching like a madman until he finally finds the egg and stares at it, puzzled. He thinks he found something really suspicious, and judging by its appearance, wonders if it doesn't look more like a rock than an egg. Then he gets spooked when the system informs him that his skeleton warrior was destroyed. He turns around and assumes the lizard dragon must be returning after detecting an intruder. It doesn't take long before the boss returns to the nest, furious. The protagonist tries to hide and thinks he's totally screwed. He also knows that now that the boss is back, he won't be able to search the nest any further. But looking at the thing that looks like an egg, he figures that if that's the case, he has no choice but to take it, even if it isn't really an egg. After returning to where the players were fighting the boss, he sees a chaotic scene with several bodies. Hirkin approaches one of them laughing, and while grabbing the player's watch, he says that Warlord is a really interesting game, and that there are so many crazies because everyone has too much freedom. The player gets furious and curses at him, but Hirkin stabs his sword near the player's face, and as the guy gets scared, the protagonist tells him to listen carefully to what he's about to say. He explains that he was just playing around until now, but that he has a lot to lose in this game. So he makes it clear that next time they meet, they won't get off so easy, and that this is a warning to them, and that woman too. After saying that, he turns and runs off at full speed. After walking a bit, he thinks that he swears. If those players keep bothering him, even after his warning, it'll be all-out war. Then he thinks it's time to make some extra cash with everything he got in the swamp dungeon. So he posts on the game forum that he just found a lizard dragon in the lizard swamp and wants to sell the exact location for 100,000 won. After returning to where Ahimbri is, he places what he thinks is an egg on the table and awkwardly tells Ahimbri that he brought what he asked for. He then hopes it really is the right item, since he doesn't want to search the whole map again. The NPC observes it closely, which makes the protagonist anxious, until Ahimbri says that this is the item he was looking for and thanks the protagonist. He gets excited, thinking that in the end, he managed to bring the correct item. Ahimbri comments that he was faster than expected and thought someone like him would take much longer. Hirkin gets nervous, wondering if he knew that and still gave him this mission. What kind of NPC is this? Still, he says he did his best and wants to know if he'll get another mission. Ahimbri asks if the protagonist knows what the item is, because when they investigated the area near where the mutant monsters were, this thing was found. That's why he temporarily named the item, which looks like an egg, the Stone of Corruption. Hirkin is shocked, realizing that must be the reason those guys were after him, since he knows the Stone of Corruption is an important origin item related to the main quest. He figures they just wanted to make sure no one else got the item that could impact the main quest's progression. But at the time, he thought he had been scammed when he got that quest, so he never expected it to be part of the main story. Ahimbri apologizes and says he knew the mission would be too hard for the protagonist, but since they're facing an unknown and powerful being, he needed to test Hirkin's willpower. He then gets serious and asks if Hirkin is ready to fight against corruption. The protagonist clenches his fists tightly, thinking he has plenty of willpower, and if this is part of the main quest, then it's his golden opportunity. So he yells that he'll devote his body and soul to it, but Ahimbri replies, "Not right now," which leaves the protagonist completely confused. So he asks the NPC to be clearer. He explains that Hirkin must have seen how strong the monsters are, and therefore doesn't think he should give such a mission to a rookie. The protagonist is stunned, wondering if his level is really too low to continue the mission. But suddenly, the NPC changes his expression and tells the protagonist that if he asks the great mage Ahimbri to please accept him as a disciple, he might be willing to help and train him. After that, the protagonist leaves Ahimbri's room without saying a single word. Not long after, the system informs him that he completed the nest egg quest, obtained the title of Ahimbri's disciple, and that the quest, Ahimbri's Teachings Part 2, has begun, which requires him to reach level 40 before meeting Ahimbri again. The reward will be a skill book of the corrupted tracker ring. Then he remembers the pathetic scene he had to act out exactly what the NPC told him to do, so he gets furious, thinking Ahimbri really is a con artist. Meanwhile, in some dungeon, a fierce monster has been completely defeated. They shout to end the battle, and for anyone needing healing to head to the healers. One of the players tells his captain that their guild finally did something big. He agrees and asks the warrior to tell everyone to regroup after resting. He then runs over to another player, thanks him, and says he was even stronger than expected. That player is the knight who went after the protagonist. He replies that it was no problem at all, and that it was all thanks to the other players who supported him so well. The guild captain insists that wasn't the case and says that if it had been just them, at least 5 members would have died. That's why he believes it was thanks to him that they completed the raid with no casualties. He also admits he had doubts when he heard there were helpers who accepted money to assist in boss raids, and says he's really glad he hired him. Then he takes a pouch of coins and says it's all they have to offer. The knight notices that this isn't the promised payment. The captain awkwardly admits he knows that, but says it's separate from the original deal. However, the knight gets serious and says he won't accept it, as he doesn't like breaking the rules. This leaves the guild captain embarrassed and very surprised, and he apologizes, thinking the knight was just helping out for the money. While the captain wonders why a ranker would take on such a low-level raid, the knight walks off, saying he's going to collect all the items from the nest, as promised. The captain yells to warn him that there probably isn't anything of value in the nest. Meanwhile, the player thinks he got really lucky, since he never imagined he'd get a chance like this to obtain the Stone of Corruption. He remembers being worried when he heard the lizard dragon had respawned, thinking that Hey-Ho Mask might already be on the quest. But since the lizard dragon was still alive, he assumes the protagonist must have failed. So he jumps into the nest and thinks that defeating a boss isn't something you do with mechanics alone. He gets excited, knowing that all he has to do now is grab the Stone of Corruption and stop Hey-Ho Mask from completing the quest. But then he's disappointed to realize the Stone of Corruption isn't there. He starts trembling with rage and shouts, cursing the protagonist. Meanwhile, the protagonist is logged out, staring intently at his phone. He takes a deep breath and says it's time, since during all those tough days, he kept telling himself that if he endured a bit longer, things would get better. But he gets nervous and decides that ends now. He builds up confidence and says he's going to do it. He's going to order steak. He grabs his phone, starts jumping around like crazy, and says he was trying to save on gas and food just in case. But now that he's completed the main quest, he figures it's okay to treat himself to a juicy steak, especially since he earned some extra money. So he thinks it's a fitting reward and time to convert it into real money. As soon as he does, he sees his massive balance in the account and gets excited, saying it's finally time for steak. But then he watches several deductions hit his account: debt payments, utility bills, and rent. His balance drops to $856.1, leaving him stunned, since that's not even enough to buy instant noodles. He starts pounding the floor and wonders why he works so hard and is still broke. Then he gets a message from Romeni, asking if he's still alive and if he quit WTube for good. He picks up his phone and thinks he forgot to update Romeni about his situation, and that he can't make videos anymore because some lunatics are after him. But then he gets nervous and wonders if he really needs to be so cautious when he's practically starving. What did he even do wrong? He's just an innocent player enjoying the game. Frustrated, he gets up and decides he doesn't care anymore. He'll do whatever he wants. So he logs back into the game and goes to a creepy place that looks like a graveyard. The system notifies that he's entered the field of the forest of the dead. As he walks, he tells his summons that no matter how many times he comes here, it's always scary. He figures this is probably the best place for him to grind some experience, and the creepy atmosphere is also great for attracting views on his videos. With that, he turns around and calls his summons to hunt. But first, he says they've got a new teammate now, and he's in charge of strategy from now on. He tells them to get along. His new summon is a skeleton mage, a skill that the con artist Ahimbri gave him. He knows that the more his mastery improves, the more advanced the effects they'll be able to use. So he concludes it's a great skill, but also one that consumes a lot of mana. Then, looking ahead, he sees a hand emerging from the ground and says, that's their next target. Several skeletons begin rising from the ground as well, all at level 33. This leaves his summons confused, as the enemies look just like them. Hirkin looks back and wants to know what his summons are doing, since they're supposed to be out there hunting monsters. But they're clearly terrified of fighting copies of themselves. Still, the protagonist couldn't care less, and makes it clear that his summons will realize once the fight begins that undead monsters have a different trait than normal ones. However, he sees his summons hiding in fear and immediately demands to know what the hell they're doing. Frustrated, he snaps his fingers and tells them to stop wasting time. They have a lot of work to do. Boney wastes no time and charges forward, striking a skeleton with pity. He then watches the enemy stand still for a moment, but it soon keeps moving even after being hit, leaving Boney confused. Hirkin comments that, yes, that's right, normal attacks don't work. So he pulls a warhammer from his inventory, one that adds 35 strength, and lands a simple hit on the skeleton, shattering it completely. He follows up with a blow to its skull, sending it flying, and thinks it was a perfect home run. He turns around and asks his summons if they saw what he just did. They just have to smash the skull. But what he sees instead is all of his summons holding their heads in fear of him, terrified that he might do the same to them. Hirkan then says the goal is to hunt 100 skeletons in 100 minutes because he's recording a timed attack video. With a sinister smile, he makes it very clear that if they fail, he won't let them leave. That instantly makes them dash off at full speed to hunt. After some time, the system reports that the protagonist has eliminated several skeletons and leveled up. He compliments his summons on doing a great job and thinks he expected them to take longer to get used to a weapon they'd never used before. But in the end, they're doing better than expected. Because of that, he believes the video will be a success, but he'll need to talk to Rameni first. That's when he senses a strange presence, and a massive level 35 skeleton warrior appears right in front of him. Hirkin gets nervous, realizing this is a rare monster that spawns randomly. He also knows there's a chance it might come back in a bovine form, so he runs at full speed with his summons toward the boss, thinking that he's finally going to get steak. As he charges, he wonders what he should eat first, grilled or roasted. But then he sees the skeleton warrior swinging a massive axe and has to leap back quickly, or he would have been wiped out by the monster's powerful blow. After retreating to his summons, he thinks that was terrifying. He nearly died without even reacting. Thankfully, he aimed at the creature's arm, which only enraged it more, and it quickly follows up with another strike. But Hirkin anticipates it, and together with his summons, strikes the skeleton warrior in the pelvis, slamming it to the ground. He then checks if his summons are okay. While saying it was easier than expected, he doesn't notice the skeleton warrior charging at him again. Just before it hits him, he comments that the creature is quite impatient. Then he yells out that there's still one last attack left from one of his summons. The skeleton mage begins channeling fire magic and launches it, hitting the warrior dead on and setting its bones ablaze. The system announces that the protagonist has slain a skeleton warrior and earned a large amount of experience. Hirkin takes a deep breath, thinking that was a close one. Looking at the flaming remains of the creature, he concludes he should get at least 10,000 views on that video. But he's still hungry and decides he's definitely grilling that steak. At that moment, the system alerts that the field boss has detected the death of one of the protagonist's subordinates, which leaves Hirkan confused. The system then continues warning that the field boss has found intruders, and finally, that the field boss is awakening. A massive magic circle appears right next to them. Then its head begins to emerge, followed by its body, until a colossal creature fully materializes before Hirkin and his summons. He's left speechless, unable to believe what he's seeing. The level 40 golden skeleton boss has appeared. He knows that the golden skeleton is the Forest of the Dead's boss, and the first mage class boss, a powerful one known as the Rookie Killer. He also recalls that the condition to make it appear was defeating several skeletons, though he hadn't considered that at the time. He thinks there's no way he can beat it, but if he does, it'll be a huge jackpot. Then he gets an idea of how to pull it off if he buffs his skeletons. Maybe there's a chance. So he calls his summons into battle, only to notice they've vanished. The system then informs him that his summons were dispelled due to lack of mana, which leaves him stunned. He starts to panic. He's all alone in this fight. He doesn't realize it's normal, since he had summoned all 4 and even made the mage cast all those spells. So there's no way he'd still have mana left. Facing the colossal creature, he knows he has no choice. He grabs his watch and says it's time to warm up his body for the first time in a long while. He activates his slot and equips his battle armor. With that, he faces the boss and dares it to bring it on. Without hesitation, he takes the initiative and charges forward. The golden skeleton quickly begins channeling its skill, growing stronger, and once it's ready, it fires at the protagonist, who has to dodge the powerful attacks. Hirkin knows that a single hit would kill him, and yet the boss is launching multiple attacks. It's no wonder it's called the Rookie Killer. While the golden skeleton continues attacking, Hirkin realizes he has no chance of winning if he allows it to keep casting spells freely. He jumps, and just before striking, thinks that all he needs to do is stop it from casting. he delivers a powerful blow to one of the golden skeleton's palms, managing to delay its attack. Hirkin notices that the boss's hands are tied to its spells, so he figures he just needs to destroy all of them. At that moment, the golden skeleton begins to react strangely, and the system alerts that the field boss is staring directly at the protagonist, which confuses him. Then the system warns that the boss has seen through him and is evaluating the protagonist's skill level. After making several gestures with its hands, the golden skeleton releases an intense wave of dark, negative energy. Hirkin gets scared, wondering what the hell is happening. In a blink, he's bombarded by the boss's dark energy. While running from the attacks, he tries to understand what's going on until he sees he won't be able to dodge one of them. At the last second, he leaps to the side, causing the attack to crash into the ground, but the impact launches him violently across the area. Lying on the ground, he catches his breath and questions the boss's insane attack pattern. He doesn't remember it being like this. He wonders if he's misremembering, or if the golden skeleton had hidden patterns, or maybe it just got rebalanced in a patch, like the Minotaur in the tutorial mission. That thought discourages him, since, unfortunately, he can't recall clearly after all. It's been years since he last hunted a golden skeleton. Still, he grabs his weapon and thinks how frustrating this is, having no skeletons to summon and not even remembering the boss's full attack pattern. Looking up at the colossal creature in front of him, he wonders how he's going to defeat it. The boss quickly launches another attack, forcing the protagonist to dodge again. He keeps doing this with every attack the golden skeleton makes. As he gets a little closer to the boss, he thinks he can actually dodge the attacks as long as he knows their trajectory. Unfortunately, he also knows that this leaves him with no time to counterattack, so he reflects that he needs to find a blind spot as fast as possible. That's when he gets startled. The boss grabs him with one of its arms. It pulls him in and lets out a tremendous roar right in his face. Hirkin thinks he's completely screwed. Watching the creature channeling an attack right in front of him, he wonders how many attack patterns this thing has. But he smiles and says he has a trump card too. He uses his demonic curse skill to inflict a debuff on the boss. The system announces that the target's stats will be reduced by 13%. With that, the protagonist breaks free from the boss's grip and charges at it. He comments that he didn't know how he'd get an opening, but the boss ended up giving him one. Then he channels power into his fist and delivers a powerful punch straight to the golden skeleton's face. A huge explosion follows from the impact. The skeleton's bones begin cracking and breaking at once, which gets Hirkin completely hyped. The golden skeleton starts to fade away. Not long after, the system informs the protagonist that he has defeated the golden skeleton, earned lots of experience points, received a hefty sum of gold coins, obtained the title Skeleton Slayer, and leveled up. He breathes in relief. As he deactivates his slot, he thinks that was a close one, certain he would have failed if it had lasted 10 more minutes. Then he pulls up his status screen and sees that he's currently at level 36 with 9 titles. His stats show 109 strength, 35 stamina, 101 intelligence, and 141 mana. He gets excited, knowing he's reached level 36. However, he also realizes that things will get dangerous from here. Even though 141 mana is a decent number considering he invested the bare minimum in that stat, he knows it's still not enough. So far, he's been pushing forward thanks to his titles and level ups, but now that he has more skills to use, it's just not sufficient. After all, he increased his strength for his skeleton warriors, but what's the point if the skeleton warriors vanish? He hangs his head, thinking he's already earned all the mana-related titles he can at this point, and wants new gear, but unfortunately, he has no money for that. Then, out of nowhere, he smiles and says he doesn't care and doesn't even know anymore. He skips off saying that, for now, he'll send the video to Rameni and focus on reaching level 40, and that later, for sure, he's going to eat beef ramen. Sometime later, after he sends the video he recorded in the Forest of Monsters dungeon to his editor, she watches it. She pauses it, takes a deep breath, and punches her teddy bear hard. Furious, she keeps beating the stuffed animal and asks if the protagonist is actually insane. But suddenly, her personality shifts, and she gets all giddy, jumping around the room and saying that Hirkin managed to defeat a boss stronger than him without taking a single hit, and he did it with no practice at all, proving he's truly talented. She sits down in her chair, relieved, and says the video is so good it barely needs any editing, and she'll soon send him the final version. Then she starts wondering what title to use for the video. Thinking of something cool, she suddenly has an idea and excitedly declares that she'll title it The Solo Emperor. Later, in the game, at the Bangsu Castle branch of the Adventurers Association, Hirkin arrives saying to Ahimbri that he's back, stronger just like he asked. He notices the protagonist all dirty and asks what happened and why he looks like a beggar. Hirkin laughs and just tells the NPC to hand over the reward already. The NPC agrees and says he'll give the promised reward. The system then announces that the protagonist has completed the quest, Ahimbri's Teachings Part 2, and has received the skill book, Osteology. He's very impressed by the skill book, knowing it's a very rare necromancer ability not found on the market. The skill increases the stats of all summoned skeletons by 5%, reduces the mana cost to summon and maintain them by 10%, and also allows summoning one additional skeleton. But what he needed most was precisely that mana cost reduction. So he starts thanking the NPC frantically. Ahimbri also shows Hirkan that he obtained the corrupted tracker ring, and that he should use the corrupted stone he brought to harness its power. The corrupted tracker ring is unique in the game's history, and grants 2 bonus points to class-specific stats and 9 points to all attributes. When used together with the corrupted tracker necklace, all attributes are boosted by 21 more points. Hirkan is drooling with happiness because he knows the corrupted tracker ring is that rare ring given only to the first players to complete the main storyline. He jumps to grab the ring and thanks the NPC, but Ahimbri closes his hand and says, on second thought, he's not sure he can just hand it over. He turns away, leaving the protagonist confused. Then, Ahimbri turns back, laughing, and tells him that if he wants the ring, he should come and take it if he can. Hirkan laughs and says, all right. Without hesitation, he activates his slot, puts on his battle armor, and charges at the NPC full force. Sometime later, outside the Scavengers Association, Hirkan has managed to get the ring. However, he's exhausted, wondering what got into that crazy old man he would have killed him if he weren't an NPC. But in the end, he got the ring and the next quest. Ahimbri had told him that he'd lost contact with an agent named Miggy and that he thought the protagonist should visit Suryu Castle. Remembering that, he decides to let it slide for now. However, he knows that the Suryu Castle area is high level, so he figures he should level up more on the way. Then he sees several messages on his watch. It's Rameni with urgent news, saying she just posted the Golden Skeleton video on WTube and thinks he should take a look. The protagonist opens the video and immediately sees that it has over 2 million views, along with many comments praising him and asking for more, many of them including donations to the channel. He's blown away, wondering what the hell is happening. He drops to the ground in disbelief and starts counting how many zeros are in his account. Soon, he starts thinking about what to eat. Tomahawk, ribeye, filet mignon, sirloin, so many delicious things. He starts drooling, thinking he can now eat anything tasty he wants. Then he wonders about the jackpot he just hit. He knew the reactions would be good, but not this good. As he's thinking that he needs to log off soon, his watch beeps with a new message. It's a huge donation, and someone says they've been sending him messages. The message is from the recruitment leader of the Thunder Hunters Guild, saying they've tried reaching out several times but hadn't gotten a reply, so they're leaving a comment here. He says that the Thunder Hunters Guild would like to officially recruit him and asks if he could spare some time to discuss it with them. Hirkan gets furious. He knows that the Thunder Hunters is Che Solyan's guild, the woman who kicked him out of the game in his previous life. He then remembers how persistent they were back then, and apparently, they're still doing the same thing. Furious, he flips off the message and says he wouldn't join the Thunder Hunters even if his life depended on it. But after thinking a bit more, he feels like he said this before, so he recalls his past life when he was furious and saying it was annoying as hell, and he wants to know why Che Solyan is being so persistent after being rejected so many times, especially since she was already in a guild. One of his friends at the time commented that he was pretty lucky, since the Thunder Hunters were one of the best guilds even among the top 30, and that the guild leader was the daughter of a rich family, so if he joined, he'd definitely get a 6-figure salary. His other friend added that it made sense they were after someone like Hirkan, Then he smiled and explained that it was because the protagonist was really good at the game, and in all the raid videos from his guild, every single comment was just about him. He finished by saying that, honestly, Hirkan was way too good for them. Hirkan took a deep breath and quickly asked them to stop, making it clear he didn't care about the 6-figure salary because he didn't want to join the Thunder Hunters, and the money would come once their own guild became the strongest. Plus, he preferred to keep playing with his current guild. His friend gave a fake little laugh and said he was right. So, after remembering all that, he feels even more frustrated now, but he knows they don't need to betray him again over it. He starts slapping his own face and thinks it's not time to get drunk on the money. He's got a lot of work to do, so he pulls out the skeleton fragments and throws them. As soon as he summons them all, he makes it clear to his minions that they know he was the one who did everything in the Golden Skeleton raid and that they did nothing. He explains that they're going to start training again because they need to move more efficiently and can't repeat what happened last time, so he asks if they're up for it. But he ends up seeing his old friends in his summons faces, then quickly realizes they're not them, and that makes him happy, thinking this time will be different. He calls his summons to become the strongest, then says their next destination is Suryu Castle, and asks if they should train along the way. All his summons nod, suggesting yes. With that, Hirkan summons his weapon and says the training will be simple, they're just going to run all the way there. And if any of them fall behind, they'll get punished. That makes them take off running at full speed, afraid of getting hit. And so, they head for Suryu Castle. Meanwhile, Syl is deep in thought. A mage approaches and asks what she's thinking about. She's standing over several defeated monsters. The mage informs her lady that it's almost time for the meeting. This is Hatch from the Thunder Hunters Guild. Syl jumps down from where she was and quickly asks how the progress is going on the Corrupted Count mission. Hatch says they haven't made any progress yet and still haven't found any clue for the next quest. Syl gets furious and says she can't believe they let the Hydra Guild grab the main quest before them. Hatch tries to argue, saying she thinks they'll find it soon, since they're going to a meeting with the leaders of all 30 top guilds. Syl emphasizes that there's no way a meeting with those losers will be useful. Even so, Hatch asks the guildmaster to be careful as she walks away. Guys, here's a quick recap of the latest chapters to keep you updated. The protagonist's WTube video was a hit, and he made a lot of money overnight. He was also close to losing control, but thanks to the person responsible for everything he went through, the flames of his revenge were reignited, so he decided to walk the path of a hungry beast. The first thing he did was go to the loan shark he had borrowed money from, and as soon as he got there, he threw down his money bag and made it clear he would pay the full debt, principal, and interest in cash, which surprised the loan shark. Jaehyun, as he's called in real life, after handing over the money, asked if everything was okay. Next, the protagonist bought rare skill books, which made him quite happy. However, once back in the game, he knew he was broke again, with his account balance at 0. Surrounded by his summons, Hirkan lamented that he thought he was ready for this, but admitted that seeing his bank account still hurt. He quickly decided to forget about it and learn the new skills he bought. He wasted no time and learned them. The system then informed him he had acquired the skin grafting skill, a level F mastery passive that increases defense by attaching monster remains to his skin. If he takes too much damage, the material must be replaced. He decided to test it right away, and the system asked if he wanted to use the skeleton warrior's horns to enhance it. He said yes, and the system notified that he had gained the essence of a skeleton warrior and 5 defense points. Curious, he equipped a sword and tested it by attacking himself. He was pleased, and commented that he was perfectly fine, and that it was much better than expected since nothing happened to him. Then he moved on to the next skill. The system notified him he had acquired the Curse of Sloth skill, allowing him to cast a curse that slows the target's movements. The larger, faster, and stronger the target, the more mana it consumes and the shorter the duration. Hirkan found it interesting, looked to the side, saw his summons, and tested the skill on them, concluding it could be useful in battle. Finally, he opened his last book. The system then informed him he had obtained the Golem summoning skill. Hirkan knew this was the hardest skill to get and the one he wanted most. He tested it immediately, which even surprised his summons. He smiled, and seeing his summoned golem, said he could finally summon it. Then he shouted that a necromancer is nothing without golems, and judging by the size of his new summon, He knew it was more reliable than any of the tanks there. He smiled and snapped his fingers, activating his copy mode, passive, on the golem. He then created a bond with the summon, knowing it had a copy mode that could sync its movements with his. By combining the golem's strength with his own movements, he believed it could be ridiculously effective. However, the golem just stood still, shocking the summons and driving the protagonist crazy, wondering why it didn't work. He questioned whether it was a bug, but then the golem mimicked his earlier movement, leaving everyone speechless. Hirkin wondered if this was faster than his other summons could react, then laughed and asked himself what he should do next. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone mentioned they thought everyone had arrived and asked if they could start the meeting. This was Nergal, leader of the Ares Guild, who thanked everyone for coming despite being busy. Shev the Slayer, leader of the Red Bulls Guild, laughed and said he recognized a few familiar faces there. Berg, the leader of the Big Smile Guild, just takes a deep breath, while Syl, the leader of the Thunder Hunters Guild, remains silent. Berg wants to know if 29 were invited, and only 4 showed up. Shev laughs and says more people came than he expected, since they're talking about the top 30 guilds. Nergal points out that this was really sudden, then explains that normally the top 30 warlord guilds are fiercely competing, and it's very rare to have a meeting like this one. However, he becomes serious and reveals that the Hydra Guild discovered the identity of the corrupted Count and is planning a final raid in a month. Shev starts laughing and says that's insane, knowing none of the other guilds even came close. And if that's true, then Hydra pulled something off. But he's quickly interrupted by someone slamming the table. It's Berg, furious, yelling that it's all over if they let Hydra get the corrupted Count, since they'll end up monopolizing all future main quests, sponsors, ads, and content. Syl tells Berg to shut up, and releasing her power, says that if he's scared, he should just sit quietly and not bother anyone. Berg doesn't like that at all, quickly equips his claws and asks if she wants to fight. Shev asks them to calm down, saying they're not here to fight. Nergal agrees with the blonde and makes it clear that a fight between them would only benefit Hydra. Then, Nergal emphasizes that this is exactly why he's proposing an anti-Hydra alliance. The 4 guilds present will agree not to fight until the corrupted Count missions are finished, and will share all info about him. He then asks if anyone opposes his idea. Shev says he's not a big fan of alliance schemes, but thinks there's no other way. Berg makes it clear that if they don't stop Hydra, they're screwed. Nergal concludes the meeting, but Syl, without saying a word, clearly didn't like any of it. Later, outside the game, someone's taking a shower. It's her, thinking the meeting was humiliating since they couldn't even defeat the Chapter 1 boss alone and had to join forces with other guilds. But she knows there's nothing she can do for now, because if Hydra gets the corrupted Count first, they're done. So, for now, she knows it's time to lay low and wait for the next chance. She picks up her phone and tells someone to order all guild members to keep an eye on Hydra and report any strange activity, because the corrupted Count will be theirs no matter what. Meanwhile, inside the game at the Tsuryu Castle branch of the Adventurers Association, Hirkan is surprised, wanting to know what's going on. A guy says he already asked him to go to the Bobaru Forest. He explains that's where Agent Miggy disappeared and that the protagonist should search the area for traces. Hirkan says he knows the Bobaru Forest is full of level 70 monsters, a dangerous area, and that he could die instantly if he goes there now. The adventurer sighs and says that's exactly why he's asking him, a disciple of a Himbri. He then makes it clear that if the protagonist refuses, he'll lose his status as a corruption tracker, which scares him even more. After leaving the association, Hirkan sits by a fountain thinking, and concludes he's totally screwed. He opens his quest window and sees he has to find the missing Agent Miggy, who's investigating the corrupted stones, and continue the mission with a reward of 500 gold coins and additional rewards. The penalty is losing the corrupted tracker title. If the quest isn't completed in time, he has 29 days, 9 hours, and 33 minutes. Hirkan gets furious, knowing that if he loses his corrupted tracker status, he'll be kicked from the main quest. Scared, he realizes that accepting all those high-level quests backfired, since he normally wouldn't be able to complete them, but somehow managed an advance to the next stage. And to make things worse, he now accepted a quest meant for level 60 or higher, so he finds himself at a crossroads. wondering what to do, knowing he can't just give up on the main quest like that. But at the same time, he knows he can't go to the Bobaru forest either. That's when he overhears a player asking a mage if she thinks the Hydra Guild will complete the main quest. Because if they do, he believes they'll definitely rise above the other guilds. The mage emphasizes that the rest of the top 30 guilds haven't even managed to start the main quest. The player then asks what'll happen to the other main quests if the corrupted count is defeated, which scares Hirkan quite a bit, but he quickly smiles, looks at his watch, and realizes that maybe he doesn't need to go to the Bobaru forest after all. Meanwhile, someone is observing a huge castle from afar, reporting that nothing special has happened and that his and his friend's mission is finally ending, since having to sit and watch the castle for hours every day was starting to drive him crazy. He asks if his friend agrees. After getting no reply, he calls out to him, his friend being Nadal, 8th in command of Hydra. The guy wants to know what the reward for defeating the corrupted count will be, and if Hydra will definitely become the best guild. Nadal clearly says not to get ahead of themselves. He adds that it's not over yet, as their mission is to secretly monitor the corrupted count's castle. He explains they can't let their guard down or leak info, because true professionals know how to stay calm. Then, out of nowhere, a player runs up shouting that he's found Natal, which makes him furious, asking what the hell is going on. The player is Kim's, rank 3 of the Red Bull Guild, who smiles and says it's been a while. Natal, shaking with rage, demands to know what a Red Bull member is doing there. Kim says the boss on that mountain is high level, so he came to defeat it. He then asks if that's not what they're there for too. Natal looks at his friend, knowing they can't reveal their real mission, and replies that yes, that's exactly why. But Kim's walks up and asks why he looks like he's dying to take a dump, which enrages Natal even more, yelling that it's not true. Kim's turns and says he's leaving, and tells Natal to feel free to go relieve himself, making him even crazier with rage, screaming that he already said that's not it. So Kim's walks away while Natal yells at him to come back. After walking a bit, Kim's taps his watch and informs someone that the 8th in command of Hydra is there, and that it looks like the lead they got was true. Shev and Yel are listening as Kim's passes on the information. The leader says it's unbelievable that the anonymous lead about the corrupted count's location was accurate. Yel says she was sure it was a prank, but in the end, they sent Kim's just in case. So she points out that they were given such important information way too easily. She wonders what the motive is. Shev says he doesn't know, but maybe it's someone inside Hydra holding a grudge against their own guild. Kim's chimes in, saying they're not really in a position to be picky about things like that, since they were about to lose everything to Hydra. So he asks if he can start a fight to buy them some time. But Yel tells him no and says to fall back for now, since if that really is the corrupted count's location, then most of Hydra's forces must be there, and they can't afford to lose one of their top members right now. Kim says the leader is being too soft on him, since it's not like the Red Bulls will fall apart if he's not around. But at that moment, someone charges at him and a massive explosion goes off. Shev and Yel are immediately concerned about their friend. As the dust settles, Kim's finds a sword pointed at his face and realizes they weren't the only ones who got the anonymous tip. He then starts laughing and announces that the princess of the Thunder Hunters is there. She immediately demands that Kim's tell her everything he knows or she'll eliminate him right there. This is the Thunder Princess, Hahui, from the Thunder Hunters Guild. Meanwhile, a bear growls fiercely as the protagonist's golem prepares for battle. The massive bear wastes no time and strikes the golem, which simply defends against the attacks. Eventually, it spots an opening and counterattacks, while the protagonist's summons watch the fight. The battle rages on, and the skeletons are enjoying the show while eating popcorn. Hirkan, however, is puzzled, checking his status and wondering why everything is so quiet, since he's sure the emails were sent and he should be getting replies. He knows the only way to solve this without going to Bobaru Forest is to force the mission to end. He's aware that Warlord's main story consists of many chapters. The current one is Chapter 1, The Corrupted Count. And when the Corrupted Count is defeated, the chapter ends and all related missions are forcefully concluded. He takes a deep breath and realizes that even if he tried to defeat the Corrupted Count himself, he wouldn't make it in time. So he prefers to move on to the next chapter within the remaining time. He then starts yelling that he doesn't care who it is, He just needs someone to defeat the corrupted count. That's exactly why he's spreading the information to several guilds, except for Chae Sol-yeon's. So he wonders why no one is responding. Suddenly, something catches his attention. The system notifies him that the Hydra Guild is starting a live stream. Meanwhile, his golem is being severely attacked, having its arms broken, and the giant bear doesn't stop, launching another powerful blow. But Hirkin shows up, punching the bear in the head and telling it to shut up and stay quiet while he's thinking. He makes it clear that he needs to watch a stream, so he wants peace. After sitting down to watch the live stream, a host greets all viewers and announces that the Hydra Guild was the first to discover the identity of the corrupted count and is planning to attempt a raid. The planned date for the raid is, Hirkin hopes it's sometime this month. Then the host says it'll be in 3 days, which really surprises the protagonist. The stream ends, and he comments that it's sooner than expected, but not shocking, just as he predicted. He starts laughing like a maniac and thinks this is perfect. He then orders his golem to resume fighting the bear. While they fight, he remarks that Hydra probably got nervous because he spread the info to other guilds. Since he knows that if it's Hydra, there's nothing to worry about. They're far ahead of the other guilds in terms of progress on the main quest, and have many skilled players. So he concludes that once the main mission ends, his biggest obstacle will be gone, and in 3 days, his happy life will begin. After some time, the 3 days pass, and many players are being defeated. The system announces that all Hydra Guild members died in the raid and the mission failed, leaving the protagonist in utter disbelief. He throws his phone to the ground and yells, demanding to know if they're messing with him. He shouts that if they were going to start the raid so early, the least they could have had was a plan. He wants to know why they even tried if they were going to fail in an hour. He also questions whether he overestimated them and if he now needs to start looking for alternatives. Then he sees that the Red Bulls Guild has started a live stream. He quickly grabs his phone and wonders if Red Bulls is where the Slayer Shev is from. Meanwhile, in the game, Shev the Slayer comments that since the field is being reset, he assumes the Hydra Guild's raid failed. He then asks if his soldiers saw what happened. He explains that the corrupted count is a powerful enemy, powerful enough to massacre even the Hydra Guild. And not only that, but they also won't have backup item supplies, meaning their chances of success will be very low. Even so, Shev slams his sword into the ground and shouts, making it clear that the Red Bulls Guild will accept the challenge. The soldiers immediately start yelling, fired up for the battle ahead. Jae-hyun, watching the stream, wonders if the Red Bulls Guild is really going to start the corrupted count quest, since even though they're good, he knows it's still not enough. Then he's surprised to hear Shev announce that they'll be joined in the raid by their partner, the Guildmaster of the Thunder Hunters, the Queen of Thunder, Sil. This leaves the protagonist confused after realizing it's Chae Sol-yeon. A bit earlier, at the Red Bulls camp, Shev was commenting on how unexpected it was that the Queen of Thunder herself requested a meeting, so he wants to know if she's declaring war. Sil replies, no, that for now, they're still allies. Shev looks at Kim's and says he heard one of his men got beaten up, while Sil says it was nothing, just their guild's way of saying hello. Hahui sticks her tongue out at Kim's, teasing him. Shev then gets serious and asks to cut to the point, saying he heard they have info on the corrupted. He pretends not to know what she's talking about, but Sil says she doesn't have time for games, and that she's confirmed some members of the top 30 guilds received information about the corrupted count, and that since someone like him, who couldn't even begin tracking the count, suddenly started doing it, even an idiot would notice. He laughs and admits she caught him, saying it's true, but notes they don't know who provided the tip. She gives a sinister laugh and asks if he really thinks the Hydra Guild will succeed. Shev says he's not sure. Sil replies they'll fail, and that they moved up the raid date just to be first. But she knows the corrupted count is the first boss, so it won't be that easy. They'd have better chances if they let others go first to gather information. Shev gets serious and says he's sure she didn't come just to talk about Hydra, so what's her real point? She gives a slight smile, then slams her sword hard into the table, even surprising the Red Bulls leader. While Kim's gets ready for the worst, Shev signals him to stay calm. Sil asks if they can't work together on the corrupted count raid, and says she'll let him get the first kill. Shev is quite surprised and thinks she's bluffing, but now, with her in the raid against the corrupted count, He sees this was expected. Watching how she fights and slays raid monsters, he realizes she's not just talk. Still, he knows the corrupted Count is no joke. As for the Count himself, he laughs and says they're not doing bad for scum like them. This is the corrupted Count, the main quest boss and final boss of Chapter 1. He then commands his creatures to attack without rest and declares he'll crush their will completely. Thus, an intense battle begins, with the Red Bulls and Thunder Hunters alliance on one side and the corrupted Count on the other. As the fight drags on, Shev knows their allied forces are reaching their limit. Syl comments that the monsters just keep coming. Then Shev steps forward and, unleashing his fearsome power, yells to the Queen of Thunder that he'll clear a path for her. He launches a powerful forward strike, and she rushes in alongside him. As Shev's mighty attack heads toward the corrupted Count, the Queen of Thunder follows close behind. The boss becomes enraged and counterattacks, demanding to know how they dare challenge him. Syl tries with all her might to keep dodging the countless attacks from the corrupted Count until she leaps into the air, fully confident, and prepares her strike but ends up being severely hit, leaving her confused and trying to understand where the attacks came from. The corrupted Count had buried his strikes into the ground, so they would come up behind her and intercept her midair. Shev, worried, shouts to know if she's okay. Syl takes a deep breath, gives a slight smile, then unleashes several attacks, breaking free and rushing toward the corrupted Count. With eyes full of confidence, she manages to land her powerful blow on the boss. Shev breathes a sigh of relief and says she's scarier than he thought. And so, before the fallen body of the corrupted Count, Syl sees the system message confirming that the Red Bulls and Thunder Hunters guilds have defeated the corrupted Count. The protagonist is stunned upon hearing that Chae Seol-yeon defeated the boss of Chapter 1. He throws his phone to the ground and mutters that it doesn't matter, he only needed the corrupted Count to be defeated, and it didn't matter by whom. He then hopes Syl enjoys it while she can, because the corrupted Count will be the last she gets. After all, he knows that in the end, the one who'll win will be him. Sometime later, in the dungeon of the Bulkus Mountains, the protagonist is with his summons, thinking that his real name is Jaehyun, and currently, in the game, he's Hirkin. He's a warlord player who somehow reincarnated. His dream is to become the strongest in the game, to get revenge on the bastards who betrayed him. As he reflects on all this, he suddenly hears a tremendous noise around him, and before he realizes it, a herd of wild boars is charging straight at him, and he has to run to avoid being trampled. A few hours earlier, the protagonist arrived at the entrance to the Bulkus Mountains and saw that the field was blocked. While Littlebone is confused by the barrier, Hirkin explains that it's a locked field until someone meets a certain condition. Since he hasn't met it yet, entry is restricted, but he knows that the Bulkus Mountains are the main stage of Chapter 2's storyline, and that when the main quest of Chapter 1 is completed, entry is automatically granted. So after crossing the barrier, the system notifies him that he has entered the Bulkus Mountains and received the title of First to Set Foot in the Bulkus Mountains, increasing all his stats by 2 points and class-related attributes by 1 point. He gets excited and thinks, just as expected, no one else had discovered it yet. He calls his summons and declares that it's his time to shine, but he quickly comes face to face with several monsters. The monsters in question are all wild boars, level 60, fierce beasts that roam in packs. Hirkin, being only level 41, is shocked to encounter them right away. Back in the present, the boars are enraged and charging after the protagonist, who keeps running and wondering how he got so unlucky and how the hell he ran into those boars as soon as he entered. He also thinks some people have probably already noticed the blocked field is now open, so he can't afford to waste any more time there. He knows his chances are low, but still, it looks like he has to try. So he shouts for his summons to activate their helms and charge at the boars. However, the creatures are so strong that they easily defeat the protagonist's summons. As Hirkin retreats, thinking his summons were wiped out in a single hit, the system notifies that the skeleton warrior has been destroyed after taking too much damage. The protagonist then smiles and says that was just bait. He activates his Sloth Curse skill on the massive wild boars. He approaches and tells them they won't be able to move for a while. Then, drawing his sword, he charges in and says it's time to pay for destroying his skeletons, until he steps on a banana peel and face plants right in front of the massive beasts. Then, another banana peel falls onto his head. Hirkin grows furious, demanding to know what the hell is going on and where the banana peel came from. Up on a tree branch, a monkey is laughing. It's a level 50 armored monkey, a monster known for playing tricks on humans. Hirkin gets even angrier, quickly stands up, and tells the monkey to wait because he's about to get beaten up. But then the system notifies him that the effect of the sloth curse has worn off. He turns around in a panic, thinking this is really bad. Just then, a bright flash comes from his direction and completely shatters the wild boar's head. Hirkin is startled, trying to understand what just happened. Up in a tree, someone is firing a crossbow, releasing countless arrows that, in a blink, brutally wipe out several wild boars. Hirkin, amazed by how easily the monsters were taken down, wonders how it's possible with just one shot. Then the mysterious person approaches and asks if the protagonist is hurt. Hirkin turns and sees an old man, wondering if it could really be who he's thinking. Meanwhile, at Suryu Castle, two adventurers are surprised by what they see ahead. One of them notices a knight leaning against the wall and asks if that's the White Mamba's armor set. The other responds that it looks like it, and then asks if the person they're seeing is a ranker. The knight, visibly impatient, adjusts his glasses and asks if his companion has found the identity of the informant. A mage steps out from the shadows and says no, that none of the guilds know who sent the information. He adds that it makes sense after all. We're talking about someone who knew the identity of the corrupted count and was willing to give that information away for free. So how are they supposed to find someone like that? The knight also wants to know about the Ha-Ho mask if his friend has any updates. The mage replies that he's just posting regular hunting videos, and that it seems to be something about giant bears. The knight begins to get angry while the mage continues, saying there's no way a newbie who just started the main storyline could be behind all this. He then asks where the knight's next assistant job will be. The knight says it'll be with the Sweepers Guild. The mage, frustrated, comments that it looks like they're going to be really busy again. The knight assures him he'll handle the assistant job and asks his friend to focus on finding the person who leaked the information. He emphasizes that they don't know who this person is, but swears he'll make sure they pay for destroying the balance of the world. Later, in a humble cabin in the Bulkus Mountains, the old man who saved the protagonist from the boars asks if he's really a disciple of the mage Ahimbri. All excited, Hirkin replies that he is, and thinks to himself how lucky he was. He never thought he'd run into Ma Wong, the main NPC from Chapter 2's central storyline. The old man says that luckily he found the protagonist in time while out on patrol. Hirkin knows that Ma Wong is skilled enough to have once been the prince's sword instructor, but was expelled due to an unfortunate event. After that, he became the captain of the guards who protect the Bulkus Mountains. That's why Hirkan knows for sure he had to find this NPC in Chapter 2 and feels incredibly lucky. Ma Wong tells the protagonist that he should go back, which confuses him, so he asks the old man to clarify. Ma Wong explains that he doesn't know what brought Hirkan here, but there's nothing in that place except monsters. So again, he urges him to go back before something worse happens. Hirkan smiles and says the corrupted count is dead. He thinks to himself that there's no point in the old man playing hard to get, since he already knows how to enter Chapter 2. He then adds that even with the count's defeat, there are still corrupted monsters out there, and that he was tracking the source and ended up here. He then wants to know if the old man knows anything about it. The old man says he has something in mind, but no evidence yet, which is why he asks if the protagonist could help him gather some. With that, the system notifies that Hirkan has obtained the title of first to contact a Bulkus Watchman, and also the title of Initiator, granting him an additional 14 attribute points. Hirkan gets excited after learning he received 2 rare titles, and tells the old man that he can indeed help. Ma Wong asks the protagonist to first calm down and then investigate the monsters near the area. Thus, the quest, the Bulkus Watchman's Request, is created, and Hirkan must defeat 50 monsters in the Bulkus Mountains, with a reward of 500 gold coins and increased trust from Ma Wong. Without wasting time, Hirkan heads out of the cabin, thinking this is great since he knew he needed to level up anyway. He then reflects that he'll leave the high-level monsters, like wild boars and warrior bears, for later, and start with the easier ones. Until he remembers something. Recalling how the armored monkey mocked him, he decides he'll start with it, and wonders how he's going to make it pay. Later, still in the Bulkas Mountains dungeon, a player slips on a banana peel, followed by another. This keeps happening for a while, and the armored monkey just laughs at the players. Then another player starts walking by, and the monkey immediately sets its sights on its next victim. It gets ready, but Hirkin suddenly appears behind it and says he finally found it. The monkey turns around awkwardly, and the protagonist, with a bizarre expression, says he's going to eliminate it. Without hesitation, he grabs his sword and charges at the creature. However, the armored monkey easily dodges all of the protagonist's attacks. Hirkin tries everything to land a hit, but the monkey always evades. Then the monkey increases its speed and quickly flees. The protagonist chases after it, furious. While chasing the creature, he thinks about how annoying the monkey is so fast, and the trees keep getting in the way, making it hard to attack. So he stops on a tree branch, prepares an attack, and throws his sword at the monkey. The creature notices the attack coming and gets really scared. The protagonist's sword hits, but it lands right beside the monkey, scaring it even more. The creature starts laughing at the protagonist, but Hirkin makes it clear that the sword attack was just a distraction. Right then, his golem appears and delivers a powerful punch, causing massive destruction. Hirkin watches from afar, and it doesn't take long for the system to inform him that he has earned the title of being the first to hunt down and eliminate an armored monkey. Hirkin is pleased, and thinks it's time to start hunting more of them. Meanwhile, several cameras are snapping photos, as Shev the Slayer and Syl the Queen of Thunder are there. They shout out congratulations to the Red Bull Guild's Red Bull, and to Syl from the Thunder Hunters for completing the first chapter's boss raid. Then, a reporter player approaches the Queen of Thunder and asks if she'd like to say something. She gives a slight smile and says she thinks they were really lucky this time, but they'll keep working hard to bring good results in the future. However, off camera, she looks displeased. Hahui, walking with the Queen of Thunder, says she's the best. Then he admits he thought they were done for when the last wave of monsters came, but then she appeared, jumped in alone, and defeated the corrupted Count. Syl says she was lucky and emphasizes that they couldn't have done it without the Red Bulls. Still, she knows that to achieve a full victory, they need the skills of the player known as Heiho Mask. Disappointed, she asks Hahui to call Hatch. Shocked, he yells, wanting to know why the Queen of Thunder would need that loser. Syl becomes serious and makes it clear that there's something they need to hunt. Meanwhile, something is breaking, and the system soon informs that the protagonist's equipment durability has dropped to 0 and was destroyed. Hirkin looks at his sword in frustration and thinks it's time to look for new gear. But he knows the problem is that he has no money, so he concludes that his only option is to try for gems, since he knows they have a very low drop rate from monsters and are used to craft items. For example, the Green Goblin gem grants 1 extra point of dexterity. The Werewolf gem grants 2 extra points in the attack attribute. They also have additional effects depending on the monster they drop from. He then thinks that gems dropped by armored monkeys are great for making equipment. With that, he summons his creatures and shouts that they're going to hunt every last armored monkey. 9 hours later, Hirkin is devastated, as he had no success in getting any gem drops. And, looking at the pile of countless armored monkeys, he wonders if a drop should have happened by now. Then, with a crazed expression, he tells his summons that he'll try just 1 more, because he thinks maybe this time it will drop. Suddenly, someone approaches, calling out to the protagonist. A warrior in sinister armor says that Hirkin must be Heiho Mask. The protagonist is intrigued, wondering who this person appearing out of nowhere could be. Looking more closely, he notices the man is decked out in a full and expensive fire lizard set and wields a hero orc sword, meaning he's at least level 70. So he starts thinking maybe the guy is one of those players. The man introduces himself as Quixote. Then, he starts making some strange movements. And as soon as he stops in a completely ridiculous pose, he officially challenges the protagonist to a duel. Hirkin is confused, wondering what the hell the guy in front of him is doing, while Quixote comments that he heard the protagonist is getting popular on WTube, so he points out that beating him would make him popular too. Hirkin thinks that he must be just another attention-starved loser. He turns away and says he's busy and tells him to get lost. Quixote yells, asking the protagonist to wait. Hirkin, irritated, wonders why the gem isn't dropping, and now there's a crazy idiot bothering him on top of it. Quixote shouts that he'll pay 5,000 gold if the protagonist fights him. Hirkin stops when he hears that, quickly turns around and runs up to the player, saying he'll gladly accept the duel and welcomes him, calling him a customer, and thinking that he loves customers.